Alrighty, guys, good evening. Hope you guys are wonderfully evening so far, guys. Tonight we're going to be doing some Space Marines 2. Hi. Alrighty. On the late again, guys. It's just kind of the way it goes sometimes. Just shit just pops up out of nowhere. It all happens at the same time. Of course it does. Well, been a while, guys. COVID happened, so this is going to be kind of a congested COVID, but we have to cover the Helldivers 2 patch notes, not specifically the patch notes. I don't plan on covering that. Helldivers 2, for me, personally, is on hiatus until they actually increase the difficulty. And with the current patch, as you guys can imagine, they actually made things a lot easier, as one could tell. When they buffed a bunch of shit, it was obviously going to make everything infinitely easier. And stuff, the game itself was relatively easy to begin with in the first place. Reddit didn't think so. Reddit kept trying to get things nerfed, and at the end of the day, I guess maybe they're trying to use Reddit. We talked about the possibility of them maybe changing things around a bit, so Reddit, would then feel as though they could actually turn up the difficulty again. That was months ago at this point. This isn't going to be a traditional patch notes, as in we're going to cover all the ups and downs of it, because that's not my intention. And as I mentioned a little bit ago, I don't think it's actually going to be, the game's not going to be fun until they actually find a way of increasing the difficulty, which then is probably going to make a loop of the community then thinking the game is too hard, and then they're going to ask for buffs again. That being said, over the course of the last 6 months, guys, I have asked for a lot of different buffs for the game. I've also asked for a lot of improvements in terms of increasing difficulty as well, in addition to buffing a lot of stuff in the game that essentially was just kind of poopy. A lot of the things in the BetterDivers list have been addressed after the fact. Burning resources, as you guys know, is now a talked about topic. Shams brought it up in a Reddit post after we had a long-term discussion about it on stream. As it turns out, kind of weird how some of the coincidences are turning out, which I am going to cover, because as it turns out, no one talks about this shit unless I talk about it, because I'm the one that's streaming, so yeah. I take the opportunity here to discuss the things that have come to pass. Hey, look there, guys. There's an emote wheel in the game now. That's probably one of my favorite ones. One of my favorite ones. Like I said, I don't think we aren't going to cover, like, extensively cover all the patch notes here, because it's not going to matter. The way changes like this work in most games is when there's so much shit that has changed, you have to basically wait for the meta and everything to shake out before you get an idea of how the game is going to function. In my personal opinion, I don't think we're going to be able to figure out how Helldivers 2 is going to function until they start instituting more of their long-term goals and plan. This is just a stopgap, as it turns out, along the way. So you could, who and how, about the ways and balances of things getting buffed and nerfed, which I have in the past. But when things are shook up too much, when things are shaken up a lot, you have to wait to get a kind of overall picture of everything going on. And as I said earlier in the stream, I don't think we're going to be able to figure this out until we get an idea of what they want for difficulty. As it currently stands right now, I haven't played the game, and I don't plan on playing the game. I watched a couple streamers playing it earlier, and it indeed looks extremely fucking easy compared to what it was, which was already relatively easy. So until we actually kind of figure out exactly where they're going to go with the difficulty levels, or they add more difficulty to the game, these changes here don't really even matter. Everything here has been super buffed and kind of to a laughable extent. Super buffed to a laughable extent just to overcompensate possibly for any kind of nuance or deliberation by the community as to whether or not something's a buff or not. I'd actually say this is a community appeasement patch more than an actual balancing patch. I don't think even a lot of this has anything to do with balancing as much as just making the community see it as a positive thing, as opposed to like it's a PR statement as opposed to even a balancing patch. I don't think this is balanced at all. And by the way, guys, I'm still getting over COVID. That was about a week and a half ago, which is one of the reasons we haven't been doing a podcast. So my voice is still a little bit hoarse and also dropped like an octave or something like that. Voice is very hoarse, and it also makes it difficult to talk for prolonged periods of time, but we'll do our best here. But we had to cover this. Not specifically the patch notes, but just in general, the general direction of Helldivers 2. And once again, this patch notes here, one of the reasons I'm not going to extensively cover it is because I feel it doesn't fucking matter. This really doesn't matter up until the point at which the game has some semblance of balance, because prior to this it kind of did, but the community didn't like where it was. They didn't like it somewhat being challenging. They wanted it to be laughably easy. They want their Call of Duty zombies, they want their AC-130 gunships flying around and sitting in the gunner seat, scoring their kill streaks and, patting themselves on the back and thinking they did a job well done while cracking a beer. Not exactly the way the game launched with 440,000 players. The game was very much a Souls experience when it launched. I played the game at launch, and it was extremely difficult. It was very, very difficult. And it has only gotten easier since launch, even prior to this patch, which we've talked about, and I've been a big proponent of increasing difficulty while also buffing things, increasing difficulty. However, it's gotten to the point where the game was easy mode. All I was doing was walking around and collecting samples, and that's not really something where I can actually go out of my way. Like, it's not fun. I didn't find that fun. One of the reasons I was drawn to Helldivers 2 in the first place was the challenge involved in the game. And regardless of the memes the community makes and what people say on Reddit, the game became very, very easy. It became very, very easy, and they had to buff the 500 kg because the 500 kg people didn't like the idea that it basically just blew up and didn't kill stuff because they missed a line of sight check. 500 kg, if you guys are curious about that, is very, 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 very much adheres to line of sight. So if there's a little ledge or something, it will block it and it won't do damage. Putting aside there is hit registration issues in the game which affect things like ordnance, where stuff just doesn't take damage. There's a lot of clips that started popping up on Reddit of people basically killing chargers, which chargers, once again, will die in one of two ways. One, they'll just instantly die. The other one is they'll bleed out. What Reddit started doing was they started posting, which we basically talked about every time it popped up on Reddit. Reddit started posting clips of where the charger was going to bleed out, and then they just cut off the video before the bleed out. So you can see it puffing red smoke or orange smoke. You can see its back plates missing and everything like that. And it's just legitimately just like hobbling around. And it will usually die after that point in about 10 to 15 seconds. The videos almost always will cut out right before the charger bleeds out. So then it makes perfect rage bait post of, oh, look, 500 kg is broken again, lol. But if you know how the mechanic works, you know the mechanics themselves, you know that that's probably bullshit. There are cases where it doesn't do damage. We've seen them before, but it's relatively rare. That has something to do with the tick rate, and that was introduced about the same time at which hit registration issues became a problem with hitting the head on the bile titan, which the community became aware of a couple months after we talked about it on stream, and we've noticed it. Leg plates on the armor, on the chargers, for instance, you'll shoot through the leg plate. Railgun, prior, old rail cannon, old railgun used to be able to reliably hit charger legs. And I think at one point, this is hypothetical, I think at one point they dropped the tick rate of the servers to make it more agreeable for people with bad PCs. Another testament to basically just how kind of crappy the engine was, right? So, if you guys know how tick rate works, the lower your tick rate is, the worse your hit registration is, but it also reduces, it's almost a directly correlative relationship between the resources a server will consume. So, one of the reasons Valve came up with their sub-tick rate, which is just bullshit excuse for having multiple ticks in the same tick. It's basically a packet with multiple ticks in it. One of the reasons they came up with that is because it's computationally and bandwidth cheaper than actually having a native tick rate. So instead of 128 tick servers, you have 32, and then you just combine 4 ticks in the same packet for the most part, and it lowers your bandwidth costs because ticks themselves, or the data transfers, the data transfer is actually relatively small. But what matters is the most up-to-date latency, and so there's a lot of shenanigans going in the background. Counter-Strike, the community for Counter-Strike in general finally figured out, kind of gaining their knowledge, what exactly tick rates do and how they impact their gameplay. And now there are montages, comparison videos between CS:GO and CS2 showing the sub-tick rate and how it impacts gameplay, more or less, because people became aware of it. They finally figured it out, and then they started, writing posts about it, because it actually turns out it really matters. In the case of Helldivers 2, it really doesn't matter, but it started affecting things like your synchronization of units, and units became very desynced, in which you just basically shoot through either the leg or the head's in the wrong spot, or more. Most of the time, like if Bile Titan's, for instance, going to spew, its head's in one spot for a prolonged period of time, so it's not tick rate, or it's not desync. It's something to do with the shot just not registering, which pretty sure had related to tick rate in the first place. Either way, they kind of cycled away from that, and it really, really mattered whether or not. I don't even know where I was fucking going with that. We just got on a topic of fucking tick rate. But either way, the community figured out that Bile Titans, weren't taking the right amount of damage, and Charger Legs weren't taking the right amount of damage, whatever. But the 500 kg, there we go. Got off the segue there, guys. The 500 kg also suffers. Basically, anything in the game with registration will suffer from tick rate or just hit reg issues, even if it's a bomb, unless it's a prolonged explosion, not just something that instantly happens. Can actually affect the way that units take damage, and depending on whether or not the netcode becomes desynced. But we're going to talk about the engine here in a second, which was something we've talked about multiple times, but I never actually finished the entry on the BetterDivers guide. This is basically where we left off about 3 weeks ago now at this point, is an engine port, right? This is something that we're going to discuss here because, as it turns out, they may actually be considering an engine port to the Unreal 4 and 5. We talked extensively about this on stream, but I'm getting ahead of myself right now. Game should be fun, greater should be harder. Yeah, so as it turns out, now we're in a scenario, guys. Oh, before this, kind of my favorite change here, which I've tweeted at Pilts and Helldivers 2 multiple different times, has nothing to do with all this here. It's nothing to do with the stuff that increases the damage by 5,000%. Nothing to do with that. Instead, we have an emote wheel. Not an original idea to myself. Not an original idea to myself, because other games have had an emote wheel. The most telling sign about all of this, however, is the fact that Helldivers 2 didn't have an emote wheel. Does it have multiple emotes in it? It for sure fucking does. Do they even sell emotes, and it's part of what they're actually trying to capitalize on? Yes. And did they actually have an emote wheel in the game for the longest time? No. Why? I don't know. It's completely unrelated to game balance, completely unrelated to egos. I have no idea why this feature was not in the game a long time ago. A long time ago. Why was there never an emote wheel in the game? I don't know. Because specifically they try to sell cosmetics, and having people aren't going to go up to the council and re-equip a emote every time they want to fucking change one, right? People aren't going to do that. So we have plenty of cases, plenty of instances where you have these kind of really cool emotes that they're adding to each one of the war bonds, in which you actually pick up. But they never actually added a way of actually utilizing it properly in the game. Favorite thing, easy as shit to program, I guarantee you, because this is not something. This isn't like some sort of voodoo future tech or something, guys. It's a UI on the screen to do an emote that's in the game. It's not really game breaking. But I had to mention it multiple times, and then I guess they just, lo and behold, it popped up out of nowhere. Something that could have been added to the game months ago, and I guarantee you this actually didn't take that much time for them to do it. But for some strange reason, they didn't do it. By the way, could have hired me fucking 4-6 months ago, and we would have got this all sorted out, Pilts, but you didn't, so, you know. I've been here all along, just saying that. This is going to be a lot of I've been here all along sort of ordeal at this point because, once again, it has nothing to do. People are going to hoo and ha and talk about readjusting their fucking tier lists and shit about their flamers and HMGs and stalwarts and railguns and whatever. This, like I said, none of this actually matters until they actually get there's some semblance of difficulty in the game anymore. Because it doesn't matter. You can have weapons that are just pushed. We talked about the I win button, right? Some people seem to think that when a game is PvE, there's not supposed to be any sort of balance in it because balance makes the game unfun. If you have a button you push that just destroys everything, and you push it, at the end of the day, are you going to enjoy doing that? How many times are you going to enjoy pushing the I win button and clap like a little baby before, you know, it doesn't fucking matter? Because you actually need some sort of challenge. Yay, guys. Yay, we pushed the I win button. Yay! You know, like how long can you do that before you realize you're playing a mobile game and it doesn't actually give you the sort of serotonin and dopamine you're looking for because you need a challenging and engaging experience. Every game, every PvE game that's good actually has a challenging and engaging experience because there needs to be something there that keeps you hooked, not just the grind, because even then the grind isn't good. Helldivers 2 had a very challenging difficulty experience, very challenging at the beginning. It was incredibly difficult. And as I mentioned, the difficulty just went down. The indicators that you can actually use for, I'm pretty sure at this point I've kind of set them in stone that I think are a very good indicator of difficulty, overall difficulty as a rule of thumb in the game, is the number of lives left in extract, the amount of map clear, and the amount of time left. These three things will, putting aside the specialty missions where you have like 10 minutes or something to defend, these three things in a 40-minute mission are all directly correlative to each other. At the end of the day, if you start running out of lives, you'll have to start making concessions on the amount of map you clear, and then you'll eventually just run out of time. These three things are directly correlative to each other at all times. And these have only went up as the game has progressed. And it's just there's really, you can talk all you want about difficulty in the game and how enemies are, maybe you think they're more difficult now when they aren't. And putting aside this patch, which then made the enemies also easier on top of making the weapons more powerful. They're already pretty easy to begin with. It's one of the reasons I quit playing the game is because it just wasn't fun. It's not fun. Just walking around and picking up samples while throwing down a stratagem is like, maybe you drink enough beers, that's fun. But I don't think, once again, I don't think the community actually knows what the fuck they want. They know it's difficult, they know they have problems with it, and they don't want to have problems with it because they watch people play the game that don't have problems with it, and they want to be just like them. And it's almost like an entitlement to play on the hardest difficulty. The weirdest fucking thing is watching Twitter and seeing people just talk about you just turning up the difficulty like you can turn it up past 10. And I was reading a thread earlier today where someone legit just copy-pasted basically, lo and behold, guys, we have people now talking about the game being too easy, which I've been talking about for a long time, even prior to this patch. Let me shoot you guys some Twitter clips here, guys. Lo and behold, guys, something I've been saying for a while now, and under a post talking about Pilts asking, once again, I kind of hate how you can't fucking view like a post chain without logging in. It's fucking dumb. I don't know why Twitter does this. Really, really stupid. Stop from people from scraping their platform. But basically, this is a response to Pilts asking how people feel about the patch, and this is one of the posts right here. people are now ready to consider the idea that maybe they need to increase the difficulty now. And lo and behold, lo and behold, it's weird how we're just like I'm like literally like 2 steps or 3 steps ahead of everything happening. And all it is just working against me, which is fucking hilarious. Because then we have to go through this, and then people hate when you go through this. Because like, why can't you do this? Why do you need to talk about this? And that was my response to them, which is, we needed harder difficulties prior to this patch. The thing is, even with Diff 10 was hard for, I think, a weekend that I played it. And that's prior to them nerfing the Impalers. Up until that point, it was actually just relatively easy. You know, I wasn't willing, that's basically when I quit. I wasn't willing to play the game for another month or 2 months, even longer than that apparently, because now it's even easier. I wasn't willing to play the game for another 2 months before they actually added some sort of semblance of difficulty. Diff 10 came out, and then immediately the community shook their heads, hee-hawed, and tried to get things nerfed again. And they succeeded in doing so. I don't mind, by the way, everything. Most of the entries on the BetterDivers guide, guys, are for buffing stuff that sucks in the game. And there's stuff here for buffing the enemies too, which I still think is a really great idea, because there needs to be powerful and good enemies for us to actually be able to, you know, enjoy playing the game. As it turns out, you actually have to have an experience, right? And if it's easy mode, that's great. You can play on your IGN difficulty easy mode, but at the end of the day, it's not actually going to make things fun. It's not going to be challenging enough. There's a good, if you ever look at flow psychology, guys, there's a good graph for flow psychology of when you get into flow. And it is, and this is very much, it deals with enjoyment, by the way. It is very much, as it shows here, is a correlation between challenge and skill. And you need to be able to express both of them. And that's not just for flow psychology, by the way. It's also for your ability to learn. If something is too challenging, you can't learn from it. And if something's too easy, you also can't learn from it. So you can't express growth. And flow psychology, this is a more complicated one that I've seen before. Flow psychology shows basically the intersection between challenge and skill, where you need to have something that is equally skillful and equally challenging. And you need to have data points along the line where someone that can actually end up here that needs more challenge and skill can express themselves, and has more skill can express themselves. But, you know, obviously someone further down can also do it, right? And we've actually had a line here, but then Reddit wanted to just have the highest difficulty be the highest difficulty. They wanted Diff 10 to be the highest difficulty, and then they wanted to make it easy, which doesn't work, because then, for me, there's no challenge. So I literally just start filing down into here. And maybe even more, because I can't express skill, maybe even more depressed, because it's not actually fun. The game itself isn't fun. It's not challenging enough. And once again, this comes down to, do you think there's any challenge, or does it require skill to push a button that kills everything? Not really, in Helldivers 2. Pushing a button and watching everything disappear over and over again is fun for the momentary lapse where you're like, wow, this is like, you know, it's the same sort of people that enjoy cheating. It's the same sort of people that feel as though their skill is reflective of the outcome rather than actually skill expression and growth themselves. Putting aside ulterior motives, which are also an influence on people that cheat, such as accolades or your friends patting you on the back, right? Public reception or public acknowledgement that you're doing well, right? So accolades. In the case of like streaming, for instance, you'll start getting subs. So cheating can actually be rewarding, even if you personally are not experiencing growth or you are not able to express yourself. It is, rewarding for some people to cheat simply because other things are rewarding them in the game. In the case of Helldivers 2, where we have a game that isn't not super difficult anymore, it becomes difficult to be rewarded, right? And there are plenty of people that actually cheat at Helldivers 2, which is the case and has been the case for a while. Most of the time, it wasn't really rage cheaters, although towards the end of my playing experience in Helldivers 2, we started encountering more and more rage cheaters, which are people that... Rage cheating, guys, tends to be extremely, extremely rare, mainly because it's very easy to identify, and it's very easy to ban people that are rage hacking, right? Rage hacking is an extremely small subset. I'd say 99.9% of cheaters are not rage hackers. Rage hackers are the people flying around, lock bodying, just spin bodying, just sitting there and flicking around to people's brains, hard locking. It's stuff you generally do not see in games. It only happens when you have really, really, really bad anti-cheating games is when that happens. Case Helldivers 2 starting to encounter that more and more, and which means people are probably getting more and more bored with the game too. But end of the day, like, people just want things to be easy because they think winning means I'll have more fun, when in fact, if it's too easy, which is becoming the case, it's no longer fun at all. It is legit. The end game scenario is the fact that you are no longer finding challenge in the game. The camaraderie that you got when the game first launched with your friends, when everyone's grouping up and trying really hard to win the mission, isn't something that's going to happen when you have a button you push that kills everything. You have to have challenge. You have to, as a gamer, you have to have a way of actually being able to express yourself and feeling as though you are rising to the occasion and actually, you know, emotionally getting invested in it. You can't emotionally get invested in mobile games for the most part. Maybe someone can. Maybe they're deluded enough where they push the button, the gacha game, and they push the button and they're like, wow, this is so fucking amazing. I think most people outgrew that phase almost instantly when they realized basically they weren't doing anything except for pushing a button. Mobile games are fucking huge, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't have the same sort of reaction as you would with playing something like Helldivers 2, or maybe it would, depending on the individual, maybe it would. But for most people, when the game first launched with 440,000 people, they weren't pushing an I win button. They were just getting farmed by the NPCs over and over and over again for bugs and bots. And then it became more and more as people became more and more agitated every single time they died. It eventually turned into the case where now you have to get out with like all your reinforcements or something. There's no point in playing it. You just pick up your glorified sample collector, and that's pretty much it. And I guess, once again, maybe we have to go through an iteration here where the community has to become so OP that they realize how broken and easy the game is for them to actually realize that it's actually too easy now. The response, by the way, from Piltz was that, yeah, he agrees on that too, by the way. And which is funny because we've legit talked about this for like months. It's one of the reasons challenge progression and also challenge customization is actually an option on here. It's one of the last things we added, which, you know, I used the challenge customization system for Hades as a good example of what's actually a good way to go with it, where it gives people the option of picking basically their modifiers and their difficulty that they want to run on. And it would actually allows people to tailor the missions to their personal preference while still tackling something that's much more difficult. In the case of Hades 2, I found it to be extremely robust and a lot of fun, in my personal opinion. It's one of the reasons that I cited it. Of course, they haven't done that yet, and then at the end of the day, prior to this, I also cited, was it 44? We've talked about this before. I also talked about the fact that basically everyone is ending up on Diff 10, and even postulated the fact that the difficulties were so close together between Diff 7 and Diff 10 that people thought that they were basically one away from playing on the hardest difficulty, so they should be able to do it. And then they just got progressively angry about something. So the solution that I suggested was just drastically increasing the number of difficulties. Even if the difficulty step was more granular, it allows people the opportunity to actually, separate themselves from other people, and then it feels like you're going up 3 steps instead of 1 step, when in fact they may be very closely aligned with each other. And difficulty customizations, or even different ways of adjusting the difficulty, doesn't necessarily need to mean that there has to have new mobs every single level. It could be every 3 levels, for instance. Or there's ways you could tweak, for instance, the HP pools, attack, how fast they attack and recover. There's a lot of things that you can actually attribute to difficulty in a video game, other than just straight up numbers like bullet sponging, so making it more skillful. Unfortunately, we had to go through the loop here. Now, once again, I'm like literally fucking 3 steps ahead of this shit, where now we have people actually considering maybe it's too easy. It was too easy prior to the patch, is why I quit. But now we actually legitimately have people that are suggesting maybe it's too easy. And once again, I'm not even going to go over this. I'm not going to go over the easy mode changes, because they basically just did whatever the community wanted for the most part, and whatever they're memeing about that they thought was bad, they just did the opposite of it. They just like, here, have your eruptor back now with shrapnel, and regardless of the fact that it still worked fine, it just because the community was still complaining about it, even though the eruptor when it released was insanely fucking broken, which I mentioned on day one should have been hotfixed and disabled till they tweaked it, but it didn't. Instead, they left it in the game for like a month before it finally got real nerfs, and during the time period, it obviously got an cultist following of individuals that then crutched on it constantly, and then when it was gone, they thought the game was unplayable because the only weapon they're capable of using, guys, was one of the most OP weapons in the game. It was the most OP weapon that was introduced to the game. It was a stratagem weapon that was a primary, which you could take as a primary. But once again, this is all over the place. I can't even begin to gauge and talk about like the context of these changes because everything is just really. Everything they changed for the most part is just really, really, really powerful. Spray and pray, I saw this was kind of a nice change. We talked about spray and pray, and specifically how the spray and pray was a very, very niche weapon, even though there's people who are talking about needing to buff it. The one case, we'll talk about this, the one case in which the spray and pray is actually a useful weapon was during the week of Meridia, not Meridia itself, not the Meridia event, but the week of Meridia. All the missions became extremely fucking hard. And it reached a point where I was using the autocannon at this point. It reached a point where I had to use the spray and pray because nothing kept up with the amount of fodder that I was encountering. The spray and pray did. It was the only gun. Obviously, it only works on small fry. But there are so many small fry that it actually made up for the fact that basically I didn't have any weapon to use against them. And like nothing could keep up with them. Everything I tried just was not good enough. Even the more traditional weapons like the breaker or maybe the sickle or whatever the kids fucking want to use nowadays. I use plasma grenade launcher extensively, right? The plasma punisher, and that just didn't work obviously. But kind of a nice tweak here is duckbill. Duckbill, if you guys are curious, turns I learned about it in Battlefield, I guess. It turns the cone into an oval, so it technically has more of a spray pattern. I'm not a fan of duckbill, and the reason for that being is it allows you to basically overshot. It helps you aim if you can't aim, but if you can aim, it actually causes you to miss because this oval now means the outer edges of your circle are overlapping on the edges of the enemy, and as such, you actually miss. So even though, like, for people that can't aim, it would actually be an upgrade for everyone else that can aim, it's actually a downgrade because you can land a circle dead on center, and the circle is going to be more aligned with basically whatever shape the enemy is because most things are like a block or a circle, as it turns out, right? Duckbill, on the other hand, there's very few enemies in which you're going to be able to land most of your shot on it at the same range because now you have the outer edges of your circle that are now actually missing, as it turns out, because you would otherwise hit, right? So, as it turns out, it's actually a cool change, mainly because I like the idea of a duckbill muzzle, but in terms of functionality, putting aside the damage boost, it actually means it's going to be a damage nerf for anyone that can actually aim properly. So, I guess, I just saw it here, and this is probably one of the cooler changes I saw in the patch notes. Otherwise, pretty much everything else is just, hey, look, it's meme buffs. It's just literally just a list of meme buffs is what it came down to. We're memeing and obviously, universal acclaim, guys. Everyone clapping their hands because at this point there are so many buffs that you can't actually say that there's nerfs. There's so many buffs there can't possibly be nerfs, right, guys? And they buffed it so much that even the common folk can see that it's ridiculously broken. And as such, the game is now ridiculously broken in the terms of just having no difficulty in the game. So, I guess, yeah, the commando got a nerf, but it also got a buff. Yeah, as it turns out, and the community was like, wow, this is how you're supposed to do things. When you nerf something, you have to buff it too. And you're like, no, that's not the fucking way it works. That's not the fucking way it works. If something's too powerful, it doesn't need a buff when you nerf it. Fuck off. You don't have no idea how fucking balance works. Yeah, I think the one actual nerf in here was the commando, because as it turns out, it was a meme that it could just literally, some people took it just to blow up factories. They took it to blow up buildings on bots, and I commented on this before. Did it make sense? No. Did I think it needed a nerf either? No, not really. Because if you're honestly taking a commando, just like you're literally wasting one of your slots just to blow up some fabricators. I mean, there was plenty of people that used to tell me how OP and broken the fucking AMR was on bots, and like it's exactly the same as the autocannon, by the way. I'm like, what the fuck? But oh my god, like this is the reason, once again, this is the reason we're not actually covering, like, I'm trying to talk about a more objective or comprehensive overview of where Helldivers is 2 going, rather than covering the nitty gritty here, because this is so shook up. There's no way to, there's no balance in the game right now, is what it comes down to. So there's no reason to analyze this. As it turns out, everything is so easy that they have to add difficulty back in order for us to actually weigh and balance the scales of, you know, fun and easiness versus actual difficulty. There's no difficulty, so it's just easy mode. Yeah. I know, so if you've been here before, if you've been a viewer on my stream, you know that majority, despite the fact that I'm a very big proponent of difficulty, because that's the way the game was founded, it's one of the reasons I played Helldivers 2, was because it was like this gritty, dark, visceral, Souls-like horde shooter, right? It was hard when the game first came out. It launched with 440,000 people. They're grinding their butts off because it was difficult, because it was enthralling when you won. Now it's gone, and like most of the stuff on here is buffs, and I do agree the game needs buffs, but what held the game together was the challenge. At the end of the day, what really kept you playing the game was the challenge, and they stripped it out. Because the community wanted it. They wanted it stripped out. And now we got Tweedledee here that's, hey, maybe we need harder difficulty. No fucking shit, we needed harder difficulty months ago. We needed it months ago, and Diff 10 was not harder. It was not that much harder. It was harder for like a weekend, and then it became easy. It's one of the queens that's just stopped playing. Put aside World of Warcraft came out. It was just... I played it for 2 months after Meridia, and there was nothing there. Putting aside the July where they had their Swedish vacation, there was nothing fucking going on in the game. It was easy. It was super fucking easy. I was a glorified sample collector. That's it, on hardest difficulty in the game. And there's legit posts. Like, it makes it really difficult, by the way, for me to share like Twitter stuff without me logging in, but I don't want to log in. There's legit a post here that says, no, they don't need more difficulties. They're 10 already. 9 was supposed to be the hardest, and they brought out difficulty 10, which should only be possible for the best of the best Helldivers. It's fucking easy as shit. It's easy as shit. Like, it hurts them. It hurts their morale. The idea that people are playing harder difficulties, and like this is like ego divers, guys. There's like people that won't want people to play on harder difficulties because they might not be able to do it. It's like they don't want to be left behind. I'm still trying to wrap my head around why the community is so against the idea of higher difficulties and the idea of challenge in a game that's supposed to be challenging, besides the fact that it feels like they've tried so hard to get good, they don't want things to be harder because then it means they're not good anymore. And normally you're supposed to rise to the challenge, you're supposed to rise to the occasion. Like, Helldivers 2 arguably was, like, the idea of Helldivers 2 is rising to the occasion, right? To climb the mountain of dead bodies that you just absolutely just slayed your mind out of to get. And people don't want this. They want their AC-131 gunship just piling up the bodies for them so then they can pretend that they're the ones that did it. And I don't like, maybe once again, maybe this is a problem with modern US culture where people just want, not only the idea of wanting things now, right? Instant gratification, but also the idea that you don't actually need to try to achieve something anymore. But arguably for me, personally, when I was playing this, guys, by the way, I'm going to also preface this once again, I'm getting over COVID, so I'm very nasally, and I'm still having problems, just making words, let's go with that, just making words, articulating myself, there we go, I'm having problems articulating myself, but that's nothing new as it turns out. But yeah, just the whole idea that they don't want things to be difficult in a game that's supposed to be difficult is just really, it's really striking. It hurt me a lot because I really enjoyed it. I talked about how I was going to be coming back for every single war bond. I was going to make room for basically every war bond, and I was just going to stream it, even if I'll do it for a week or something. But the one thing that kept me going in this game was the difficulty. That was the one thing that kept me going, and then they just kept stripping it out till there's nothing left. And then they basically stomped on the remains of what was left over there. It's cool and everything to get, some of the, like I said, some of the buffs here are so ridiculously OP that there's no point in covering it. Everything's just absolutely broken OP. So, well, not everything, but a lot of things are just broken OP right now. And I don't know where it needs difficulty. Once again, one of the responses to Tweedledee here was Pills saying that, yeah, I think there needs to be more difficulty in the game. It's like, no, you said I agree to that there needs to be harder difficulty now. But at this point, it was already easy prior to the patch. So, like, the 500 kg, for instance, is kind of like, I actually feel really bad about it because the 500 kg was a skill-based weapon, which I had an argument with someone on that on Reddit or on Twitter a day ago or two, which is that it was based on line of sight and it was skill-based, right? So the idea that you have a weapon that has a high skill ceiling that requires you to actually line of sight check and make sure it lands properly, assuming it has registered properly. Mind you, assuming which we talked about already, mind you that it has to register properly. Line of sight of the 500 kg is extremely, extremely important, which makes you have to plan out not only your kite route, but direction of the 500 kg coming in, where it's going to land, and what's around it when it lands. It can be incredibly, incredibly powerful, but also required a significant amount of skill to use. And a lot of people freaked out about it, once again, coming back to putting aside the hit registration posts and people farming karma on Reddit, where they basically posted clips of chargers bleeding out and then cut off the clip before they bled out. Because the bleed out takes 10 to 15 seconds, so they would just basically hit the charger would be huffing, it looks like it's about to die, if you know what they look like, right, if you played the game, and then they cut the clip out right before it dies without them touching it. And I don't know what to tell you. Like, it was a very, like, when I used it, it actually felt like I was using something relatively skillful. They just buffed the shit out of the 500 kg because people were memeing about it. So now you took something that was relatively skillful and you just turned it into an everything weapon that anyone can use. Which, arguably, there are things in the game, and I'm not against there being things in the game for people that can't actually aim properly. The rail cannon, the 110s, I'm not against that, but they have trade-offs. Rail cannon has a super high cooldown on it, right? The rail cannon has a super high cooldown on it. The 110s also are, efficiency-wise, they're a lot more inferior to other things that you could potentially use against enemies. 500 kg, the precision strike, right? It's inferior, but it does almost all the work for you, which is the idea. But instead of having this division between skillful weapons and things that you could potentially actually, use to your advantage, you are now actually in a case where everything's the same level of shit and everyone can use it. Are you going to have a guy sit there and go, yay, oh my god, I can use the 500 kg now, that didn't actually realize that one of the reasons he couldn't use it is because he can't actually skill it. He couldn't get good because he wasn't actually doing it properly. They didn't even understand why they were bad in the first place. They just assumed the game was broken when in fact they're basically the ones that were broken. And once again, there are some problems. The 500 kg, once again, will occasionally have issues with registration, but that's not why the majority of people are missing it. They're sending it wrong, as it turns out, and they die, and then they think the game's at fault. And I've harped about that for months at this point, and eventually it just reached the point where now we have the 500 kg, where they buffed we tested the 500 kg, guys. We had a guy that legit came on the stream and said the precision strike has almost identical radius to the 500 kg, and it did it. Precision strike will kill you at 12 meters, where the 500 kg on flat surface, where the 500 kg will kill you to 22. It was basically double the radius. And it blew his mind. He was coming up with all different sorts of reasons, the rationale as to why that was happening. He was like, oh, as the terrain, and the height was different, it's because it was on a winter biome. And I was like, no, it's not, dude. Like, you can literally just back up and see the number pop up on your screen and you die. And it's in light armor, by the way, if you're curious about that. And, even people that allegedly test stuff don't actually test stuff in the game, or they don't do it properly and they fuck it up. And it's if you actually know how to test stuff, like you remotely have any sort of scientific background, or you're accustomed to testing for whatever reason that is, methodology, it's not that difficult to do. But some people, in their mind, when they see something happen, they come up with all different sorts of reason and rationale for why it happened, as opposed to what's actually going on, because they're emotionally invested in what's actually happening, and they'll go to any length to basically blame everything else. But 500 kg, it really hurt when I saw this. It really hurt when I saw this, putting aside all the enemies getting nerfed too, which is kind of a big deal. Yeah, they just basically, I don't know how big the radius is on the 500 kg. The 500 kg radius was already big enough, so I don't know. I guess you need to have a bigger 500 kg. Yeah, so I understand the direction that Pilts went and Shams went with things, which is they saw their game as failing, and the common way to go with things if you are accustomed to markets or a business is just to pander to the customers, right? It's true. It's 100% true. And everyone and their mom is clapping their hands right now about the numbers for the game. Once again, this comes down to how long can you push the button and watch the shit explode before you get bored of it. Because there's no difficulty anymore. Or there are for some people, right? Now we have a giant spike and people were talking about how the player base doubled. Which it did, right? But putting aside the fact that this happened to every major mega patch. Here's another one right here where basically the community doubled. Here's another one where it basically doubled again. Here's another one where it's doubled. The real kind of testament is where things are in about 1 to 2 weeks. Is about what it takes for people to get bored of stuff, right? So, another 2 weeks and see where the numbers are is probably a good testament of it. Once again, with the case of this game, it definitely feels... These people at the beginning here were not attracted to playing a game that was easy mode. And if they are now, these guys, if they are now, they're absolutely fucking delusional. Because I don't think that's the case at all. And I've mentioned multiple different times that I feel as though Arrowhead should get their their feedback data from inside the game. Not from Discord, not from Reddit, not from Twitter. It seems like after the Sony controversy, it has attracted a weird sort of group of people that just whine and complain constantly about everything because it seems like they like the idea of people getting behind it. And I don't even know what to call it. Schadenfreude? I don't even think there's a word for it now. It's basically, if it's like people that want to watch Karen's Karen. If that's a thing. Like, it's like, I don't even know. I think it's like an emerging demographic. But basically, it's people that want to watch people complain about something and get their way. That's the best way of describing it. I don't think they're even involved in the game. So I've mentioned multiple different times here over the last couple months that I very much think there's no other game in which I think this, like, it kind of weighs in the same manner. But in the case of what happened after the Sony controversy, it feels an awful lot like Arrowhead needs to get the data from actually the horse's mouth rather than social media. Social media in the case of Helldivers 2, I feel as though is extremely tainted. And it's probably to the point at which it's not even useful. There aren't many games like this. I don't even think there is. I don't think I've ever encountered a game in which I've thought that's the case. And it all started right here, which is SteamDB made sure to put a nice little A on that for the count shenanigans. But it all started right here. And after this point, the community became very, very hostile to the developers, very toxic, very negative. And they just want a Karen. They just want, like I said, every single thread that pops up is just a bunch of people bleeding and clapping their hands about anything and everything that's wrong with the game. And I don't know a better way of describing it. And once again, I think what really matters here are the people playing the game, and they should be getting the data from the people playing the game, not from Reddit, not from Twitter, and not from their Discord, because their Discord is tainted too. I guarantee you, everyone has Discord at this point. It's not like it's a server, like it's some sort of commitment being on this. It's no different than Reddit. You just have to join the server, and then you don't even need to participate on the server, and you can basically give feedback, right? So they really need to actually gather the data from inside the game, not take it from the bleeding on Reddit that now is... You gotta be kidding me.
Oh, look at this. 500 kg.
I guess that's not that much bigger. I thought this was a large nest. This is like 30 meters. Oh, it doesn't respect line of sight anymore. I'd say it's maybe even the same radius. It just doesn't have any line of sight checks, or they're much more liberal now. Okay, that's different than what I thought it was going to be. But yeah, there actually used to be skill to using the 500 kg, even in that case where I've dropped it before to actually maximize how many holes you can hit. It could be they removed the line of sight checks and now it just goes through shit. So, yeah, but anyways, getting ahead of myself, a couple things I wanted to copy here, guys. We're getting on segues here and just kind of getting off in the middle of nowhere. The big one was this. The mouse The emote wheel, guys, which I asked for months. Which is literally just pleading with them to add a feature that makes them money. Shouldn't ever be a thing, but this is like, I don't care about all these other changes here, guys. This is a huge quality of life for anyone that actually wants to use a goddamn emote. Like, this is actually a big deal. I actually laughed when I saw this because it took them so fucking long to put it in, and maybe there has to be like a developer there that really hates me or something, because I can't fucking tell at this point, but it was legit on the BetterDivers guide. The emote wheel, guys, it's not really even something like, I'm not fucking Fortnite. Fortnite did it a long time ago, right? But Fortnite's also a huge game, and the developers had to have played it, Fortnite at some point, right? And there's plenty of games with emote wheels. Why didn't a game in which we have a bunch of emotes that we basically pay money for have an emote wheel? Because it encourages them to, spend more money. I don't know. Here, could have done this 4 months ago, Pilts. You didn't want to fucking hire me. You didn't want to hire me. Yeah. They didn't want to hire me. Fucking you. I bring all the best ideas to the table. Like the emote wheel, guys. This game has multiple really well done emotes, guys. Putting aside, they actually try. Whoever their animator is for rigging actually tries to make good emotes. They do. And you can't do them because you have to go to a council to equip one. What the fuck? Why? Why? That poor animator at this studio that worked his ass off on the emotes just to see them never used because they don't have a goddamn emote wheel. What was this? Why was this here, guys? Like, I don't care. Like I said, the balance, this shit doesn't even matter anymore. The game is so broken in terms of balancing. This is not going to be worth covering until they add some semblance of difficulty to the game. And as such, we're not really going to concentrate on that. It's like, that's not exactly why I wanted to talk about this tonight. And there's going to be some I told you so's in here, as I mentioned before. But a lot of the content here is actually, like, what I'm interested in is just stuff that's kind of transpired while this is going on. So, one second, I gotta solve my captchas. There we go. Could have done that months ago, before the Swedish vacation, before the account leaking. Pilts didn't want it. Pilts didn't want it. Anyways, talking about flow, like, it must have been right before he came in, dude. Talking about flow psychology and how you need challenge to express your skill in order to actually find flow and basically enjoyment. Yeah. Which also pertains to learning, by the way. People that say that PvE games don't need balance are fucking brain dead. They're like used to playing fucking mobile games where they push a button and they get their fruit snacks. Like, they're literally a fucking monkey hitting on the button, and the serotonin dispenser goes blah, 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 and it's like, and then they have to solve the little captcha puzzle where they go boop 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 boop, and then it goes ting ting ting. Oh my god, I got some fruit snacks, guys! Oh god, that's so great! Wow, those are the kind of people that legit think that having no difficulty in a game is going to make them happy. They literally, they have to have been raised on mobile games. They really do, where they fucking push the button on their gacha game and then pop some serotonin and dopamine. They're like, wow, guys, this is so great. This is great, guys. Jesus. But one of the big things I wanted to cover, one of the things, the emote wheel, I do want to cover the engine, which we're going to talk about here in a second, which we've talked about extensively over the last couple months. Mainly in June is when I started talking about, basically, the BetterDivers guide. But we never actually flushed it out. And it was mainly, I could start digging up videos. If I was a better YouTuber, by the way, I'd actually dig out my footage, and this is where you'd fill in the footage of me talking about this months ago. The engine is an outdated piece of shit, and I can understand Swedish pride because the Stingray engine, we looked it up. The Stingray engine for their game it was made by a Swedish company, the desktop or desk Stingray engine. It was basically made for AutoCAD, and they turned it into a game engine. And the company that made it went out of business, so I'm sure they had great fucking terms, guys. Just bravo, great terms. That 5% that Epic would otherwise get. No, just God, yeah, fuck Epic, fuck those guys. But as it turns out, at the end of the day, it's kind of weird because I actually had kind of a segue here. I had a family get together a couple days ago, and my brother was over, and I was actually talking with him about this, and he's talking about how People with PhDs, because he has a doctorate, people with PhDs, which I agree with, and I've talked about in the past, people with PhDs become very, very ideological. Basically, when you become more intelligent, you become very ideological, and as such, a lot of people want to do things in their own way, and they think they can do it better, which maybe they can, by the way. Maybe they could do it better, they could just, there's all these advantages that they can come up with in their mind to really, really make up for the difference, right? To make up for the idea that that they're spending time, they're doing this thing, right? And it's going to be better than everyone else, and it's going to be, it's so good. And they talk themselves into a corner in which they end up with a very specialized piece of software in which they're no longer able, they're going to leave the company, and no one's going to be able to take care of it. It's not industry standard. It might not even do things in the same way. It requires retraining of the staff to actually work on it properly. The new staff to come in have no idea what the fuck they're doing with their tools or why they're even made in the way that they are. And it ends up with a lot of choices, a lot of ideological and maybe philosophical choices that people are making that they think is actually going to help out their company at the end of the day. Or not even the company, it makes them feel good about doing it because it's different, right? So they end up in a scenario in which they're doing stuff that just makes them feel good about what they're doing, but actually really, really hurts the ability for the company to work on a project, or for people in the end of the day to actually be able to utilize it properly or support it properly, or being able to find, not contestants, contractors that'll be able to work on it. Unreal Engine. The Unreal Engine, guys, has been industry standard for a long time. I'm not a huge fan of Epic, even though I understand talent, guys. I understand when people put effort into something, they make something really, really grand. The Epic engine is going to outlive Arrowhead. That's just the way it is. We've talked about this relatively a lot. And once again, I never added an entry to it because it's basically where I cut it off, and I kept putting it off, and I just didn't do it. The Unreal Engine has been industry standard for a long time. You can find anyone in every nook and cranny that basically has experience with the Unreal Engine in video game development. And the reason for that is because it is huge. And as it turns out, it's a company that is gigantic. Epic owns, does Fortnite, right? So their engine they make particularly for a game, they're also heavily invested in. Well, there's other engines like the Crytek engine for Crysis, right? Or former Crysis. The Crytek engine, the Frostbite engine for DICE, there's some cool engines out there. But there's really, at the end of the day, there's no reason to make your own engine unless you're doing something super specialized that an engine doesn't do, and you'd actually have to roll a custom solution. A good example of this, which I brought up in the past, is PlanetSide 2. PlanetSide 2, another first-person shooter, but unlike other first-person shooters, battles can have up to the game basically eventually just starts breaking. But I don't think there's actually a limitation in the number of people that can actually, maybe they eventually added limits to it. There wasn't back when I played, though. You can basically have an unlimited, it's like up to 2,000 people in a hex, which, by the way, that's never possible. Once battles turned into 128 versus 128, number of people, the engine started breaking down where people wouldn't render properly, they wouldn't pop in properly, shots don't register properly. Talking about hit registration earlier with the 500 kg, shots don't register properly. Basically, the game starts breaking down, but can you still actually have a battle? Technically, you can. But there's not many games, especially back in my day, that used to be able to do that. They just weren't capable of doing that. They built their own engine, the ForgeLite engine for it. The case in point of this, though, was the talent that originally made the ForgeLite engine for PlanetSide 2 eventually moved on. People that worked originally on the engine, knew all the intricacies and how stuff worked, moved on. And it became, for them taking care of a customized monolith of time that worked for their video game, it became more and more difficult for their company to be able to do so. Their upgrades to the engine, like DX11, not DX12, DX11 took longer and longer for them to implement until eventually just it came out like 5 years later. I think DX11 showed up when I left the community, like after I stopped streaming PlanetSide 2. I'm pretty sure that happened after I left the game, and it was a testament. It's like H1Z1 ran on the same engine, and I was pretty confident that one of the reasons they couldn't add more guns to H1Z1 is because they didn't know how. It became so bad, but so apparent that they couldn't do anything because they're using something that was just, internally the staff worked with it at one point, but they could have used the Unreal 4 engine or Unreal 3 engine at the time. I think it was Unreal 4 engine. Unreal 4 engine, they could have went with the Unreal 4 engine, but they didn't because they thought they could save some money. In the case of Helldivers 2, we have a specialized piece of equipment, which is the engine, that now becomes more and more difficult to support over the years, and it becomes a monolith of time, and the original people that worked on the engine that might be really familiar with it are going to move on. And the new staff that you now need to train that might not even know how things work properly, I'm sure they're actually familiar with the Unreal Engine, but are they familiar with the Stingray engine? No. And that amounts to a lot of time and expertise. Not only do you lose when you lose someone, but you also don't get back when new people show up. And you can't just get people that already have the experience because it's something that no one has experience with because it's a dead engine. Putting that aside, Epic probably is able to actually work with developers on a contractual basis on stuff that they might need help with for their engines. One of the reasons you license an engine is to get support, right? And you could do that. I'm sure they could actually help with anything in any way, shape, or form to actually make things work. And in the case of Helldivers 2, there isn't really anything in the game that's all that specialized. The most specialized stuff in Helldivers 2 is possibly the AI. There's a lot of AI interactions that are kind of weird and quirky, but that's not really something that's particular to the Stingray engine as opposed to the Unreal Engine. That's a lot of custom coding that someone made in the background. And I'm sure they could do it for the Unreal Engine. It's not really something where it's not trying to make 256 players work in a single hex, because it doesn't really work out that way, right? It's not really that big of a deal. The Fortnite engine, or excuse me, the Unreal Engine most likely can take care of, and as it take care of the issues that Helldivers 2 might have ran into. The problem is transitioning it now, is porting it, is the biggest problem. And I'm when we talked about the Unreal Engine in the past, I'm not saying that wouldn't take a lot of work, because it would definitely take a lot of fucking work, right? But there's ways and balance, and you can legitimately make an argument for trading off between... Well, I do actually have Reddit posts archived on this too. You could weigh and balance the cost associated with doing something extremely custom, rolling your own solution, having to have talent in-house that then takes care of the engine. When you license someone else's engine, you don't have to fix weird engine bugs. Epic does that. I mean, although there is going to be some weird stuff with implementing your own stuff, but if you've played around with the Crytek engine or the Unreal Engine, DICE, the Frostbite engine, unfortunately, is not free, but it's extremely easy. You're basically making a mod for a video game, which is why mods don't even happen anymore for the most part. Modding turned out to be someone's job. So instead of making mods that are free, they just, they just made their own game, and they sell it for $5, even though it's a piece of shit. And someone's gonna buy Goat Simulator. So, as it turns out, they can make money on it. But anyways, in the case of an Unreal Engine, that 5% of your revenue seems like 5%. You're fucking feeding the machine, right? So, I can actually kind of understand why Arrowhead wanted to go with the Stingray engine, because people like stuff that's, we talked before about like Saab and their own, basically Saab builds fighters, right? They also built cars, although that spun off and went bankrupt. Saabs are a lot of fun, by the way, Saab cars. But anyways, putting that aside, there's national pride, right? For the most part, using something that people created over there in Sweden that no one else has, although no one else really wants. No one else has, and it's kind of a testament to something where it makes you feel good about using it. So going full circle to where I was talking about my brother, working with a bunch of people that have PhDs, where you have a bunch of people who are like, yeah, this is pretty cool. I like this, right? I like something that's in-house. But the amount of time and investment that you have to spend, you could easily make. It's not even quantifiable. The 5%. Getting support, getting something, an engine that will outlive your company. Like, we live in a day and age, guys. It used to be something, where companies would come and go. When you get monoliths that are so big, the company's so big, it will more than likely, Epic will never leave. It'll just be trade hands. Epic as a company will just trade hands over the eons. This is going to go out, but Epic will probably still be a company in 200 years from now, assuming the human race still survives and we want entertainment. Epic will probably still be a company, and there'll be the Unreal 20 engine. When that happens, it is an engine that will outlive your game company. Arrowhead will most likely go under, or they'll sell off, or they'll just close their doors well before either Epic goes under or the Unreal Engine becomes unsupported. They'll change versions. That engine, that talent, and people in the industry being trained on something isn't something, that 5% isn't something you can even quantify when you compare it to the Stingray engine itself, and having to have super niche specialized talent that's going to become harder and harder to train and come by. until it eventually just disappears, because these people, just like with the Forge Light engine for PlanetSide 2, these people are eventually going to move on with their lives, or, you know, maybe realize they get a better offer somewhere else, or, you know, whatever, you know. Either way, like the whole idea that you can get a pre-built engine that you don't need to work, like they struggle so hard to like add like physics and eye candy into this. I'm sure someone there is working hard, right? It's to struggle and add physics and add, you know, they said they can't have more than, I don't know if it's legitimate or not, but like the idea that you can't have more than one mech because it puts strain on the engine. I mean, come on. Yeah, like, you can already see there's already some cracks in the engine that already exists, right? So we talked extensively about the idea of engine porting, even though I didn't put an entry on here because it was one of the last things I was going to do, and I didn't want to spend a couple hours typing it out. So we just never added it to as a full entry to the BetterDivers guide. But a different transitioning to the Unreal Engine was something they should consider doing. I mentioned at the time, I think it was in June or July. I think it was in July. Where we talked about the fact that basically they're coming back from vacation and they should actually consider, because Arrowhead has a shitload of money right now. They're not hard up for money in any way, shape, or form. They made their bank on their game, and they don't really need money. So they have basically a seed money they can 100% burn, and it actually allows them ample opportunity to either transition the game to a new engine in its entirety right now, or hire a side project to actually do it while it's happening, right? So while the game's in production, they start the process of porting it over. And I mentioned before that even Arrowhead, or Epic, probably even has experts at their company that could help with the process of transitioning that they could hire, or contractor work that they could hire out to Epic to help them with the process. Because as it turns out, not only do they have a lot of money, they don't need to save that 5% anymore. They definitely don't need to save that 5% anymore. It's become a case where, you know, that's actually hurting their company, where they can't do stuff because it turns out it actually was, you know, it's not something. It's something that you have to go back when you change something in the game and then it breaks something else that is completely unrelated to it. It kind of comes to it like a lot of the weird bugs with the last couple patches that popped out. Like, I don't harp on Arrowhead for bug fixing because they usually do. Some of the bugs are there, and we've talked before about the community being overly toxic about just, why aren't the fucking crosshairs fixed yet, man? I can't aim up. I can't aim my gun properly because the crosshair is missing. Like, you know, shit like that. Because people are often, it's kind of a sad place to be in, but people are often where they look at, cause and effect. They see something there and they think X is bad. You know how we talked about push the button equal fun? It's the same sort of thing. They see something in the negatives of the patch notes, so they see bugs that haven't been fixed, and someone's there still gritting their teeth wanting to type something that they get upvoted for, and then they just type basically what's been there for a while. And weirdly enough, it just, you know, they just keep harping on it for free karma, more or less. But anyways, talking about how the engine just introduces weird random bugs. In the case of introducing a new feature, and all of a sudden out pops bugs that are unrelated to something. And in the case of like even the mechs, where one of the CSRs actually commented that people couldn't have more than one mech because it would cause issues with the engine. That's a pretty good sign that, you know, like, you can already tell that things are going wrong with it, and if they want their game to be much bigger than it currently is. We already experienced what seems to be the extent of unit spawning, so people are like, why don't you just add more units? I agree, adding more units actually makes things feel more epic, but in the case of bugs, for instance, it seemed like combined kills was maxing out about around 1,800 units per game. Like, the most we ever saw is like in the nursery missions, in which like hardest difficulty on nursery missions was about 1,800 bugs, and on average it was relatively consistent around 1,800 bugs. And it seems like not like that was a limitation of the engine, but rather some sort of soft limit they have internally in the game, because the game can't take much more than that. So they probably just run it up to what they can before they know stuff starts breaking, right? So yeah, like even the cool part of the game for bugs was playing against massive numbers, and it seems like we're actually running into a case where they just can't turn up the numbers anymore. Saw someone get 2K kills. Personally, I'd probably say bullshit if I have a video of getting 1K personal kills. But if you're talking about 2K combined kills, maybe But for me personally, like from all the games I was in, like roughly keeping tabulations on stuff, it was about 1850. You probably could hit 2K if you stall long enough on the nursery. You probably could actually hit that if you stall long enough on the nursery, which isn't really saying much because it'll just constantly spawn enemies. But yeah. Oh, was it a nursery kill? $2K personal? I would say bullshit on that, unless it's some sort of mechanic abuse. Out of curiosity here, like they saw my 1K video and then they had to make a 2K video. Yeah. A solo 2,000 kills.
What?
Nursery. Yeah, so all they did was farm the nursery spawns. My 1K kill game, guys, was organic with 4 people. That's a nursery mission. No, well, kind of does. That's, in the case of nurseries, I'd say that's a little bit different, because it particularly, will just spawn enemies forever. I don't think there's a hard cap in the game. Rather, the mechanics are designed in a way where it limits relatively soft caps the limited number of units that you actually run into. I had a hatchery game that was around 1,800 kills, too, which, was non-nursery related as well. But no, I don't think it's just 2K, it's just you ran out of time. Like, there's a spawn number of units and the amount of time in which he had, and basically you just run out of the two. Either way, I don't, like, that's definitely not normal. Even for a solo game, that doesn't really make sense. Once again, it kind of makes sense for a nursery game, because if you just sit around the hive, they'll just spawn units forever, is more or less just what happens, right? So, you can legit just sit there and farm the geysers of bugs, so... Not really what I was talking about. Yeah, you could do... I guess you could do that. Not, once again, not really exactly the same thing. We're talking about actually organic games with 4 players. That is like... So, in the case of solo, that's even less impressive. In the case of solo, like, normally you have, like, less escorts and less spawns for enemies. Which means he was heavily just farming the... Like, I briefly looked through the video, just heavily farming the geysers of bugs, where they just pop out and you just throw shit on them. Which isn't really all that interesting. In case the 1K game, for instance, I had were organic patrols that were moving around the map that I had that we took care of. That wasn't 1K. That was 1K personal, but it was also a high kill count game on top of it. I think it was like a 1,600 kill game, but you got 1K of them. A little bit different than just popping, fucking popping stratagems on bug holes. Either way, moving along, at the end of the day, running into a case in which the engine just, like, they soft cap the number of units that are more or less popping out of holes, or the frequency at which they pop out of holes, because there's probably something in the background that can't keep up with it, and a lot of people already have problems with the game because the game is extremely CPU heavy, and that's a product of not only the AI operating in the background, the number of units, but also, like, the simulation and kind of the jankiness of the engine. So, once again, going back to having games in which the Unreal Engine actually possibly being more friendly towards multiple units, or just in general, most likely would be the case. I kind of doubt that the Unreal Engine couldn't actually take care of massive swarms of enemies Because in the case of Helldivers 2, it's not really like when you clean up garbage in the background, it's not like 2,000 units are on your screen at any given moment, or 1,800 units are on your screen at any given moment, right? At the end of the day, like you clean up the stuff, the assets in the background, there really shouldn't be. I mean, there's probably a limit to simultaneous units, which is more likely the issue, right? Simultaneous units, but in the case of Helldivers 2, that's not even that much. Maybe you can tell already when the engine gets janky, like with bots where they actually exist for a prolonged period of time. Bugs, on the other hand, usually like people will kill them off, so they don't really exist on the map for any prolonged period of time. But in case of bots, you'll oftentimes get a cluster of them, and then, for instance, you'll see where they get trapped on the map on a piece of terrain in the middle of the map, right? They get stuck, and then you'll just get a conglomeration of bots where the pathfinding goes bad and they just end up in the same spot. Either way, kind of getting off topic here. The whole idea is that that you could actually make a case for porting the engine over to Unreal 4 or 5, even though it would be a substantial amount of work. Because at the end of the day, you get long-term support, you get an engine that lasts longer than your current game, you get people from the market that you can actually pick up that actually are familiar with what you're doing, reduces your training, reduces contention internally, reduces the workload on people that might otherwise be working on an engine. For instance, when you are making your own engine, you have to have this portion of your staff that actually works on the engine, right? In addition to everyone else that's doing models, that's making content, you have to have this portion of the staff that's actually familiar with the engine, doing all the back-end stuff on the engine itself. With the Unreal Engine or with any engine that you're licensing, this is now another company, which means these people can now either do stuff like programming units, making behavior patterns, whatever that's happening in the background, where they're no longer actually in charge of the engine itself. There might still be intricate things that operate in the background, that the custom work that they might have to do, but it's much more targeted and doesn't actually evolve around like game breaking or engine breaking bugs in the that are introduced from the engine itself. So it's actually like a huge benefit to your company to actually license another engine. That 5%, like once again, I'm not trying to shill for Epic here because they don't need it, but that 5% in any game where you can license someone else, basically have an entire company that does one particular thing that you really need to have done, that 5% actually seems relatively insignificant. Fucking Steam takes 30% of sales, for instance, and they don't do anything except for being a content distribution platform. I've seen all different sorts of arguments for Gaben about how it's so amazing what Steam does, but that's bullshit. By the way, I'm pretty sure that's just absolutely fucking bullshit. Yeah, it's nice. I think the nicest thing about Steam, by the way, is the Steam reviews, and I think gamers are just lazy and they want all their stuff in the same place, right? That just kind of just goes without saying. Gamers want all their doodads in one little list, and they don't want to open multiple distribution platforms because gamers are lazy. But the best part of Steam is the Steam reviews, to be perfectly honest, and other than that, it really doesn't matter. People are just hooked on Steam because it's already the crack they're smoking, so metaphorically speaking. But in the case of Steam takes 30% of your sales, and Epic Store takes 12% of your sales. It makes a lot more sense to actually be on Epic than at Steam. And in the case of 5% of your revenue for an engine, that has a lot more meaning. That is an absolute boatload more meaning than fucking 30% that Steam's getting, right? A fucking entire engine is huge. And, putting aside the fact that, I guess technically Helldivers 2 is also DirectX 12, which is actually a monument that they have DirectX 12 support in an ancient game engine is ridiculous to begin with. You wouldn't even expect that, right? And you can actually go back to DirectX 11, which actually kind of sucks if you're curious about that, but the whole idea that it's available, like DirectX 12, basically industry first, was available on the Unreal Engine, right? Although it had a lot of problems. Unreal 5 engine also, they're getting through problems, but they're ironing them out. So you could technically go to the Unreal 4 engine or whatever if you really wanted to. But in a forward-looking scenario, obviously you'd be going to the Unreal 5 engine. But either way, that 5% of sales makes a lot of sense when you put it into context of all the jobs that your employees are doing and having to take care. This is an engine right here. This 5% is your engine. And it actually makes a lot of sense in terms of what you're spending money on. And once again, even then, we talk about how, so it's based on revenue, right? So that 5% of your sales is based on revenue. If you already sold the game, technically you're not selling copies of the game anymore. So that 5% isn't for the 440,000 players that they already, sold the Stingray engine to. That 440,000 players doesn't count. It's all the new sales, right? I'm pretty sure it's all the new sales. So if they transition to the Unreal Engine, they're basically grandfathering in a bunch of people that they aren't selling copies of the game to. So, I don't know. There's probably some shenanigans in there with lawyering and such. But either way, that 5%, it even means even less now because they already sold. They already have their bank. Arrowhead already has their bag of money, which is the 440,000 copies. You know, they're 440,000. I don't even know how many copies they sold. A lot of copies. All the copies they sold, right? That giant number of copies are already sold. That's there. They generally don't go back in and retroactively take sales. Maybe they do. I don't know. I haven't heard anything about that. But maybe they do take sales. But even then, going to the 5% for the Unreal Engine is for future sales, and they haven't. You know, they already sold it. So technically, they aren't really. I don't know. Maybe that's a loophole. I'm not exactly sure how that works. But basically, they have a bunch of people. Maybe it's based on number of copies that are active, which could also be a case. Licenses that are active. So. It could be that Arrowhead actually has to pay money on licenses that are active after selling the licenses for an engine that technically wasn't available because they transitioned to it. I don't know how that works. There might be something retroactive there. Lawyers doing lawyering things. But either way, if it's just based on sales, they already sold all their copies, and even then it makes even more sense to transition. Either way, with all the money that they've earned so far, they have plenty of money that they could actually spend on developers to start transitioning the engine. And lo and behold, which we talked about this in July, lo and behold, you had this pop up. Because as it turns out, when you're transitioning to, you know, when an opportunity presents itself, it's actually a good idea to transition to a new engine, right? Yeah, as it turns out, maybe 5% was actually a good idea to spend money, and you can rationalize it a lot of different ways, but it actually appears, this, by the way, this post in context here, people are thinking they're going to work on a new game. There's no way. Arrowhead is a small company, and they're struggling to hang on to Helldivers 2, which they already have. So I highly, highly doubt this is for Helldivers 3. I don't, like, maybe it's become a meme, but the idea of a game as a service is something where they're going to spend years on it, right? So they aren't looking to make Helldivers 3 right now, because this isn't like a game as a service could be 5 to 6 years down the line. There are kind of games as services which basically just release like 1 year's worth of content and then they just move on to the next game. Possible. It doesn't feel that way. This actually feels like a legitimate service. And as such, they're probably looking at expertise for Helldivers 2. So as it turns out, they are looking for someone that actually has experience with the Unreal Engine and transitioning to an Unreal Engine. Specifically, the articles are mentioning that it's actually going to be a new game, but I highly, highly doubt that. They plan on supporting this game for a long period of time, and the company is relatively small. I guarantee you they aren't working on fucking Helldivers 3.
Arrowhead may be switching to a new game engine for the studio's next project,
according
to a job listing from the studio. The Helldivers 2 developer is actively looking for a new technical lead that can help transition the studio to Unreal Engine. With the game just set to release its Chemical Agents Warband update alongside 01.001.100 patch notes offering countless buffs, the studio is also looking into the future. While sad to see another studio leave unique tech behind in favor of Epic's technical
that doesn't win any
is more essential than
doesn't keep their company employed, guys. Hanging on to ancient technology may feel good at first, but then you realize the actual costs associated with doing so isn't actually something you want to do from a company standpoint. So, yeah, it kind of makes sense, as we just discussed for the last 30 minutes, the idea of transitioning to the Unreal Engine from the Stingray engine, despite the fact that, all the money involved with it, right? The 5% of sales, if you're just looking at the 5% of sales, makes so much more sense. And it's actually kind of like, if the game, like they probably, when they first started on Helldivers 2, they probably sell, thought they're going to sell maybe 1 million copies or whatever, right? And have 40,000 active players, which they currently do right now. And that's basically all the game was going to be, right? So they just decided to go with the tools they had. They probably didn't think it'd even get as big as it did currently. And now they're running into a lot of limitations with the game engine as it stands right now and taking care of essentially an antiquated piece of technology. leaving behind a piece of nostalgia. Sure, it feels bad. Once again, there's probably pride that was involved with the, Swedish made engine. But yeah, as it turns out, taking care of something that actually causes a lot of headaches and issues, and you don't have specialized staff to take care of it, can actually weigh down your ability to perform as a company, right? That turns into someone else's job, which you pay 5% of your revenue for.
Helldivers 2 devs move to Unreal currently. Arrowhead Game Studios' Helldivers 2 runs on Autodesk Stingray, a discontinued engine from the creators of 3ds Max. Used for few other games, the dead engine is no longer supported, but Arrowhead has made the most of it. Nevertheless, the studio is looking to Unreal Engine for the studio's next game.
I don't think it's the next game. I'm pretty sure this is porting to the Unreal Engine for Helldivers 2.
Senior developer that has experience with Unreal and engine transitions. This marks the first time Arrowhead will be creating a project with Epic Games' industry-shifting engine. Since the release of the Showdown Effect in 2013, the Swedish game studio has exclusively used Autodesk Stingray, previously known as BitSquid. Prior to the release of the Showdown Effect, the studio's debut game, Magica, was built on Microsoft XNA. This freeware runtime environment ceased development in 2013, with no new
They really like using everything other
releasing after 2015. Autodesk Stingray is still in use at other studios, namely Fat Shark, the developer of Warhammer.
Maybe that's why they decided for Helldivers 2.
40,000, Darktide.
Vermintide's been around for like a decade.
It's unknown if the studio is also planning to abandon the software for Unreal.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. In the case of Vermintide, the battles aren't nearly as big. Helldivers 2 has like an epic issue, or like scope issue, where the game is actually so big it turns into a thing where you want to have large engaging encounters, right? And they can't even, if you're looking further in the long term, having more than 4 people in a game would actually be a pretty big deal, right? In Unreal Engine, the size of the areas that you're engaging in are relatively big in Helldivers 2, right? But they could be so much bigger and be so much more epic with more people, right? Especially if they're engaging in multiple parts of the map on something like a PlanetSide 2 basis for a Horde game would be pretty absurd. But they can't currently, and I highly doubt they'd ever be able to in the Stingray engine itself.
HD3 in UE5. It's not known what Arrowhead's next project is. The studio could be working on a Helldivers 3 in Unreal Engine 5, or the studio could be planning something different entirely. It is clear that the studio is moving towards the industry-leading engine for its next title.
Of course they are. It makes a lot of fucking sense from a business
expect
perspective.
Arrowhead to work on bringing the current version of Helldivers 2 into Unreal. While some gamers believe game engines can be easily swapped, porting a title to a new engine is a logistical nightmare.
It is, but other game companies have done it.
Years of development in a defunct engine. Nevertheless, it is exciting to see Arrowhead move towards an engine that will be supported far into the future.
Once again, Helldivers 2 doesn't really use anything super unique in it. I mean, obviously they have their own unique take on things, but like it's not like fucking PlanetSide 2 where you have 256 people fighting in the same hex and trying to squish that in. If you guys ever remember when Fortnite did, 100 versus 100s or 50 versus 50s, the really, really big stuff, and like, I think it was 100 versus 100, and the engine absolutely fucking choked on itself. Like, it was horrible. What was it? 80 versus 80? 80 versus 80? That was a long time ago. 200-player lobbies are coming to Fortnite BR. 50 versus 50 removed from Fortnite. It was 50-50. Either way, it was really bad. Let's see. By the way, every game should actually have a good bad. Maybe it was 50-50. I thought it was bigger than 50-50. Either way, the engine absolutely fucking choked on itself. It wasn't particularly that it couldn't support, because, beginning of Fortnite or beginning of games have 100 players in it, right? But they aren't all in the same spot, and as such, the interactions between players are more compartmentalized, and it doesn't create as much load not only on the server, but also on the players' PCs. And when they're doing 50-50s, and when I was doing 50-50s, it was so laggy and bad, just like seeing people build, and just everything was just absolutely choking on itself. But either way, in the case of Helldivers 2, they don't have anything super specific like that, and I think the most complicated thing for their game is most likely the AI. I think the most complicated thing for their actual game itself is probably the AI, and the AI interactions with, like, how it's programmed in the engine and how they're designed to interact with players. It's probably something very, very particular. I'd actually say it's probably the most specific tech that's in their game right now. But no, I don't think it's easy at all. I think that it's justifiably hard, justifiably, like, acceptable to transition to the Unreal 5 engine, the Unreal 4 engine, the Unreal 5 engine. It is actually justifiably something that the company should be looking to do because of the amount of effort and the amount of money that they currently have. The ability to acquire new employees versus maintaining employees with the skill sets that they currently have, what they actually intend on doing in the future, what it's actually inhibiting in their game right now, the bugs that are actually causing by unrelated stuff that are actually completely ironed out by an engine, the ability to acquire talent and the talent itself being outsourced to other things, having an entirely new company that will just a company in general that will completely outlive your game and your company, which is the Epic, the Epic company and the Unreal Engine, just completely outlive your IP, is something like you can't even quantify that. And the article here goes, well, it's easy mode, and people think it's easy mode. I don't think it's easy mode. I think it is extremely justifiable that they could transition to the Unreal 5 engine, and it's something that they should legitimately consider doing, and I've talked about in the past, prior to this popping up. But lo and behold, it looks like they're actually looking for something. By the way, it's kind of funny how we're talking about basically having people with specialized pieces of knowledge, and how people develop quirks, especially if they have doctorates. So very smart people end up with weird quirks where they really, really want to hang on to something. You can almost smell, like with the Stingray engine, you can almost smell like the what would you even call it, the stubbornness to hang on to it, and how they really want to make it work, right? But at the end of the day, you can't, even if you're a programmer, if you're smart, you have to be able to understand that having a standardized engine actually brings to the table, right? And I don't think this is a job, by the way. This is legitimate. So they're actually looking for someone to do this, not to transition to the Helldivers 2 engine, because they don't mention that. But I guarantee you it's for Helldivers 2. And it actually makes a lot of fucking sense, because it's actually, if they're forward-looking and they plan on supporting this game for the next 5 to 6 years, what do they want to do in 5 to 6 years from now? And can they do it right now with the Stingray engine? If they're having problems right now with just having multiple mechs in the same match, yeah. Anyways, I thought this was kind of curious because it popped up, and we've talked about this in the past. Once again, forward-looking stuff, unrelated to the patch notes, but rather just forward-looking direction of Helldivers 2 in general. Engine port. Unfortunately, I never fleshed this out, so it would be more impactful if I actually had an entry here, but we discussed it extensively at the beginning of the stream, right? So potentially, game-changing stuff in the future for Helldivers 2. This is going to take a while, mind you. If they gather staff, maybe they look at possibly porting the game in maybe a year. Like a year from now, they'd be able to do it if they have an entirely different staff that was working on it. Maybe even less than that. It depends if they hire completely new staff while the current staff is like working on the current game, and they hire new staff that actually tries to move the assets to the make a plan and move assets in the game itself to the new engine. They possibly could even do it faster than that, and then they could not retool, but reuse like the people here just to work on the game after it's moved, right? So you make another development team that then transitions the game while the current game is live, and then you eventually just merge the two later on when things become more stable and more around each other. So maybe even faster than that, but maybe within a year or something along those lines. I don't know. Like, this is the weird thing. We talked about this in the past, is games occasionally talk about transitioning. It's really relatively rare. Games occasionally talk about porting their engine or porting their assets to a new engine or moving the game to a new engine. they talk about the gripes and the things that they encounter around the way. It's relatively rare in the game industry, though, because most companies don't even talk about it. Most game companies don't even talk about it. So the amount of experience there and the amount of data points you have to go off are relatively minimal. But you can make up a lot of reasons and rationale for why you'd actually want to move from the Stingray engine to the Unreal Engine. And, well, this article postulates from the next game. The Helldivers 2 is a service, and I'd guess it's planned to be around for, foreseeable future, so at least 5 to 6 years, I would say, is probably a comfortable time period for it. It's, probably not going to be League of Legends, but it'll also be something that'll be around a while. And it's kind of doubt they're already planning the Helldivers 3. That maybe, they could rename it. Maybe it's like Overwatch 2, right? And it's just the same shit, so maybe they'll rename it to Helldivers 3 when they switch engines. But essentially, you're looking at basically Helldivers 2 with just a new engine. Makes a lot of sense. And once again, I wanted to cover this because it's popped up in the past, and we've talked about it. And lo and behold, once again, Pilts didn't want to hire me, guys. Bringing all the great ideas to the table. We talked about this a lot in July, when things were kind of really, really slow, because they're on their Swedish vacation. Moving on, though. We got one more to cover, I believe, here, guys. Once again, not even related. I don't even care. All this shit going on here with the buffs, I don't care. Because I don't plan on playing the game until it's hard again, and I kind of doubt it's going to be hard anytime soon, so, yeah. It's just not my cup of tea. And, well, Space Marines, by the way, is not it's not remotely, in any way, shape, or form, Helldivers 2. There's a lot of people that think Space Marines is a competitor with Helldivers 2. It's not. They're very, very different games. I'm playing right now just because I like Warhammer, as it turns out. I really like Warhammer. I suspect there isn't going to be, although it's relatively new because we're playing the co-op missions right now, there doesn't seem to be a lot of replayability there. So, we'll be going back to World of Warcraft to gear up my character in a couple days from now. Article on my phone popped up earlier today in my newsfeed. Lo and behold, guys. Lo and behold. There. I love the share function in Chrome. Lo and behold, guys, what we were just talking about 8 hours ago.
Arrowhead creative director agrees Helldivers 2 needs a harder difficulty mode after the buff everything patch.
Uh-huh.
Arrowhead finally dropped the big Helldivers 2 rebalancing patch.
Which is basically going over what we covered earlier.
Making, and the word is good.
Actually would have been better.
The people are loving how much more powerful guns and stratagems
people like
feel
button that
across
they
the
push
board,
and they win.
And crucially,
True story.
they like having way more options to take down Bile Titans,
More
Chargers,
options are good.
and Hulks. The largest Terminid and automaton threats are now less resilient against weapons many players always thought should deal more damage, like the autocannon or thermite grenade, and are less oppressive as a result.
Thermite grenades, per the BetterDivers guide,
too,
guys, I thought you'd
but
pop
I'm
armor
also with
pieces
user
as
Bunny
opposed to just doing a lot of
ASAP,
damage.
who told Arrowhead creative director Johan Palstead on Twitter, "Everything is great, but we need a new harder difficulty now. I played with the new patch for a few hours today and noticed that.
Oh, really?
Even at higher difficulty levels that I used to avoid because they were too hard, the bugs have lost a lot of their bite."
Yep, and even the normies guys are starting to realize that the game's easy. And the game was easy prior to this, by the way. It was very, very easy. Diff 10 was not hard.
Since most support weapons and stratagems can now penetrate charger,
Hey, we'll take a look at the overview from the dev team too, from Tilts and...
I don't want to go back
What's his
to the
name?
days when an autocannon round would bounce clean off a Bile Titan's carapace, but maybe Super Earth is a little too well equipped to dispense liberty now.
Uh-huh. And I guess part of this is getting around people that thought that PvE shouldn't actually be hard, which is funny.
It sounds like Pilestead is on the same page, at least where difficulty modes are concerned, replying, "I agree," to the user. He didn't go into any further detail, but there's precedent for Arrowhead turning up the heat over time. We just got a higher difficulty mode in August's
Div 10 was not hard.
escalation of
It was
freedom
hard
update,
for
level 10,
a weekend,
Super Helldive.
and then they nerfed everything.
We can assume the next would be level 11, and be called something like Super Duper Helldive, as some fans suggest in the thread. More time with the update could color that decision, though. We're only hours into a major adjustment for Helldivers 2. Maybe the difficulty is fine overall,
it was easy
and I
prior
just
to this
need to get
update.
used to levels 9 and 10 when I used to comfortably hang around 7 and 6. For a complete tally of what's changed, read the full patch notes, or watch Arrowhead break down the patch in the video below.
Okay. Anyways, that's I wanted to cover basically power creep, which as it goes is now maybe had to be more apparent power creep for the normies to notice it now, but even the normies are now actually noticing that, which is, I guess, maybe they'll stop memeing about how hard the game is and how broken it is because everything's like it's too difficult. So maybe that was needed. Once again, a lot of things were needed. A lot of buffs were needed, which we talked about extensively. Almost all the things on the BetterDivers guide are buffs, but there's also things in here to increase difficulty. And it was easy prior to the buffs, so I don't know where to go with that. I don't know where things are to go, and there's no reason to play Helldivers 2 until they introduce some semblance of difficulty again. Even if the kids are clapping their hands right now, it's not working that way for me, fortunately. But let's see. Game should be fun, gritty, then gamers should be harder. Challenge is an important part of being fun. Fun isn't directly equivalent to easy. And unfortunately, that guy is trying to meme it and make it seem like it is, and it's not. Once again, flow psychology, guys, as we talked about at the beginning of the stream. It is important to be able to express yourself and express skill in order for you to have fun, get the serotonin and dopamine running. It's not a gacha game where you're pushing the button and getting a treat. Bunch of memes about OP weapons. Thousand upvotes. So the question is, and we're going to keep track of this more or less, like we aren't going to cover the Reddits again until things get more balanced. But the question is how long kids are going to enjoy being OP before they get tired of pushing the button and watching things die instantly. There's a bunch of people talking about the buffs. Game is now fun and hard. And I've watched people play, it's not hard. $500 kg, kill everything in the blast radius. You included many times. Wow, that's nothing new. Okay. Drinking the Kool-Aid, guys. It'll be interesting to see where this is in maybe a week from now. I'm kind of curious. Maybe we'll circle back to it in a couple days after things settle down a bit. I'm kind of curious what people are gonna, how they're gonna respond to stuff later on. Okay, moving on, guys. I wanted to quickly cover here. Normally, we don't do podcasts right now, mainly because I've been sick and it makes it difficult to talk for prolonged periods of time, even though I'm over it. But I wanted to cover the main things I wanted to cover is basically power creep, reception, the emote wheel, and also the possibility, and from what it looks like, them transitioning to a new game engine, because it's actually really important, and we've talked about that extensively on stream, because it's actually a really big business decision, and it's something that they're actually capable of doing right now, especially while their talent's still young and pry and, you know, gunny, and they haven't been completely broken down yet, especially if they hire new staff to do it. And while the article here keeps saying that it's for a new game, I highly, highly, highly doubt that. It's kind of weird that they even jumped to the conclusion, considering the size of Arrowhead, and basically their bag, so how much money they actually have based on what they made on Helldivers 2, the size of their bag, and the downsides to the Stingray engine for Helldivers 2, as has been the case, and pretty evident for the last 6 months, if you've been 7 months, if you've been anywhere around the game, right? With all the bugs that just pop, the really weird fucking bugs that just pop up, they're just completely unrelated. It just fucking randomly happens during a patch. Okay, let's move on, guys. Let's move on. I think we're going to pop a video here. I haven't done a video in a while, and this is not a traditional video, as it's more of a meta and overall, I want to talk about the overall direction of Helldivers 2, as opposed to covering the nitty-gritty of the notes. Well, we might circle back to this in the future when it becomes apparent that they add difficulty back to the game. But until that point, it's not even worth talking about how broken stuff is or how OP stuff is or reactions to stuff. Because basically it just means you just use stuff and kill stuff and yay, fun, right? Other than that point, the game itself isn't difficult, and the thing that attracted me to the game, the thing that attracted everyone to the game, was the Souls gritty, dark feeling to this game. And that isn't where we're at right now. We'll see. We'll see where it goes. I'm going to be more interested in the game when they start adding difficulty back and how they tackle it, which we'll be discussing more in depth. But up until that point, not really. Yeah, we're going to be playing other things. I don't know. So, like as mentioned before, I think we're going to be playing, well, obviously we're going to be playing Space Marines 2 tonight. Maybe not even do that because it's so late. Space Marines 2 tonight. Then we're going to be going back to World of Warcraft to gear up my character, and then probably be playing Deadlock for the foreseeable future till it dies, pops and fizzles on Twitch, which I don't suspect is going to last that long. Somewhere 4 to 6 months, but it'll be kind of the go-to game for a bit because the kids are interested in it. So we'll see where it goes, guys. But yeah. Okay. I'm gonna wash my coffee cup out, guys, and we're gonna make a video. Right back. Right. Only you hired me 6 months ago, Pilts. Only you hired me 6 months ago. You know, we could have avoided this whole scenario. Could have hung on to at least 100,000 players. Could have kept the difficulty up too, not what you guys are going to struggle with. Could have talked about transitioning to a new engine, which everyone would have thought me crazy. And then, you know, a month later, they would have came to terms with it, which had just happened. Came to terms with the idea of moving to a new engine because maybe it wasn't a good idea to stay on a engine that basically is from a company that no longer supports it, for tools that you no longer have, you know, you have to roll in-house for custom talent that you have to get for in-house, and, you know, pretty much everything else. But, you know, it's fine. It's fine. Here every day, just making not even minimum wage, just streaming every day. It's fine. Yeah. All right. Let's see. I'm planning on covering that. Helldivers 2 for me personally is on hiatus. Hi. And COVID happened, so the well does. Been a while, guys. COVID happens personally, as one could tell. Reddit kept trying to get things nerfed. Isn't going to be actually going increasing the difficulty, which then is probably going to make a to avoid this whole scenario. Could have hung on to at least 100,000 players. Could have kept the difficulty up too. Not what you guys are going to struggle with. Could have talked about transitioning to a new engine, which are engine that basically is from a company that no longer supports it. For tools that you no longer have, you have to roll in house for custom. You have to roll in house for custom talent that you have to get for in house, and pretty much everything else. But it's fine. It's fine. Here every day, just making not even minimum wage, just streaming every day. It's fine. Okay. All right. Let's see. Done and done. Perfect. Ooh. Ooh. Hiring Box is something good, too. Maybe we'll take a look at this in a sec here, guys. Not a whole lot of Space Marine 2. That usually happens on, like, major patch days like this. Although we didn't even really cover, like, any of the changes. It didn't matter. That wasn't really the direction I was planning going with stuff, so. I'll definitely be playing Space Marine tomorrow. Let's see. Do they have a name for this patch? Using the patch number. By the way, their patch number is way too long. Gotta make a more simple patch notes, or simple numbering scheme. People can actually talk about it. Escalation of Freedom was the last one. This is just 1.00.1.1. What, they have a name for this at all? They even name their like mega patch? I don't know. Mega buff? I'll call it the mega buff. 0.01, 0.001.100, which I don't actually decimal place. It doesn't even make sense because it'd just be 0.1, right? Instead of 0.100. Who thought of that? Who thought of that? Give me their number right now. Administrative leave. Semblance of balance. Semblance. I spelled it wrong. Yep. Done and done. It's so incredibly easy, guys, to make fucking highlights with Twitch. Oh my god, when I was streaming to everything except Twitch, and I had to sit here and wait, like trying to use the tools on YouTube, which are really, really bad compared to just using like highlighting, and just easily doing it. Like Twitch or YouTube runs into issues with basically the clip being too old, or the footage being too old to do it live, or it being too long. I think it maxes out at 2 hours, because why would anyone ever have it? Something longer than 2 hours out of an 8-hour stream that did ever want to highlight, right? Became very difficult to actually manage stuff, and the best way I actually found of doing stuff with outside of Twitch was I had to wait till I was finished streaming. Then I had to export the video. I had to download the video, my own video. I had to download it, save it to my desktop, and then edit it locally with tools just to clip out, trim out the position, like the spots that I actually wanted. Using the trim tool on their built-in editor on their website literally takes ages, and you'd have every single iteration, you'd have to constantly just go back and redo it. Like, it would take forever. It's waiting for the footage to adjust itself. Well, good for Arrowhead. The kids are clapping their hands, and that's what they're going for, so for the time being, it works out. E. September. So deep. It blows my mind why there's two different tagging sections for videos on YouTube. Best way of describing things, guys. 3 steps ahead of everyone else, and they can't even see the direction I'm coming from because of it. Like stuff we discussed literally 2 to 3 months ago coming to pass. 2 months ago coming to pass, and then people reaching, hey, isn't the game a little bit too easy now? Huh. Isn't the game a little bit too easy? It was too prior to the patch, it's just you're playing on a lower difficulty than other people were. Yep. Done and done. Making content, it's what I do for a living, even though no one watches my content. I make it anyways. Simulation doesn't want me to succeed, so I don't. Okay. Done and done. So there's a lot of tube videos we haven't been covering, guys, because I've been taking break. The podcast because of COVID. Not that you had COVID, but I had COVID. It was definitely, I don't say definitely, it was worse than first time I had it. But I don't know if that's a combination of getting a worse vaccine, different strain. Obviously, I have a different strain, and then also maybe the duration between when I got my vaccine and when I got COVID, which is roughly a year. Very unfortunate. I think I got it mainly because I went out on vacation when I was. I went on vacation when I was. Well, it wasn't a vacation. I went on a day when I was sleepy, like really, really tired, because I altered my sleep schedule to actually take part in a family vacation thing I had going on. If you guys don't know how it works with your immune system, it doesn't function properly when you're like sleeping or doing other random shit. So I think I was in a case of being relatively immunocompromised, and then got in close proximity with someone that was carrying it around and got infected. Let's see. Railgun's back. Don't care. That's not what we're looking at. School lunch. Interested in that? We are not going to watch that. I thought all along, who was this even made for? I'm not actually interested in... Oh, Critical Drinkle's pretty fantastic. Not interested in looking at that. We want to take a look at... Hardware and box. Where'd you go? An update. The 9000 series, which just came out. They're releasing... A couple things happened. First off, Windows released an update to performance, which was actually pretty meaty, like double-digit meaty. Another one is they just released a firmware update, or Agasa update, which is basically firmware for your CPU, microcode update. Well, it's actually, Agasa is more like a OS because it gives microcode to the CPU, but it's actually like an OS your BIOS has in it. This I'm really interested in. We're going to take a look at this, guys. Might as well, since I chewed up all my time with Helldivers, so. Peek here, guys. 9000 series, by the way, if you just are curious, just released, and slightly faster than the 7000 series, even though it's supposed to be a lot faster. And there's all sorts of weird issues appearing with it and stuff that AMD is doing to improve it. And actually looks like it's retroactively being improved, even though it's a piece of hardware. You can literally download performance for it, which is fucking hilarious at this point. We've reached a point where you can download performance for hardware, which is pretty insane. But actually, another thing just going to point out here is hardware sales for the 9000 series are relatively low, but I think people have caught on to the gimmick of only processors that AMD are releasing, if you're a gamer, that matter are the X3D processors. As I've waited before, I have a 7950 X3D. I waited till the X3D chips came out before I purchased one, because I wasn't interested in the 7000 series, because why would I when I want the X3D? I want the X3D cache, right?
To release, AMD made some pretty bold claims in regards to the gaming performance of their new Zen 5 processors, and one such claim was that the Ryzen 7 9700X would be 6% faster than Intel's Core i7 14700K. Now, AMD has since walked back this claim, stating in a community blog post that if you run the 14700K with the Intel Extreme profile and the same high-speed memory that most reviewers use, the 9700X is at parity with the 14700K. This actually strongly suggests that AMD's marketing claims were based heavily on what we would call nerfed Intel performance, as they were limiting the 14700K to what is almost certainly a 125 watt profile, a profile that Intel has already officially stated was not to be used with K-SKU parts. That aside though, claiming that the 9700X is able to deliver the same gaming performance as the 14700K is still a pretty bold claim, given that we found it was 5% slower in our day one review. So, how do they compare in over 40 games using both the current Windows 11 23H2 build without the recent patch, and then the Insider Preview 24H2 build? Today, we're going to find out. But before...
They aren't using the new Agasa update? Maybe they're saving it for a new video? Yeah. So this guy, mainly for the... This would be for the 9900, 9950? Intercore latencies are specifically for in 9950X, are specifically between two CCD dies. They're next to each other on the chip.
Before we do, this video
9700X
is sponsored by
your mom.
no one. Damn it, Balin, can you please get us some sponsors? I need to better pay the bills, mate. Well, since Balin's being late, I don't know what he's doing over there. I think he's pretending to edit a video or something.
I'm on no sleep. No sleep.
But I do actually still have to pay Balin, even when he is pretending to edit videos. And a good way of doing that, well, a good way for you to help me do that, is join the members tab. We have a new join button, so you can support the channel that way.
Sponsored by
access to some cool
Hub.
perks such as our exclusive Discord server. We're using the latest BIOS with the microcode update.
They're using the latest BIOS. It's not going to matter because the 9700X is a single CCD. So I don't know if what version. It's so the BIOS number is specific to like gigabyte boards. The BIOS number is specific to the specific not only manufacturer but also their model. And it doesn't tell you. The Agasa is what matters because it changes it for everyone. Everyone uses basically the same version, well, relatively around the same version of Agasa. And that's what changes stuff is the Agasa.
Extreme profile,
for the most part.
So PL1 and PL2 equal 253 watts. I've also updated our X670E motherboard to BIOS version F33B, though I'm not enabling the 105 watt TDP mode, which will make next to no difference for the 9700X anyway. Okay, let's get into it. First up we have ACC, and using 23H2 we find similar performance between the 9700X and 14700K, though the 1% lows of the Intel processor were 7% higher. Switching over to the insider preview, the performance of the 14700K goes unchanged, but the 9700X saw an 8% increase, handing it a comfortable lead here. Moving on to Halo Infinite, we again find that the 14700K delivers similar performance using either version of Windows, while the 9700X was 4% faster using 24H2, a small increase that nudged it closer to the Intel processor. Testing with F124 saw the 9700.
I just updated my version of Windows because I thought I'd get the performance update. I don't think I actually have. I do have 22631. Show that a Windows update though.
100X just edge out the 14700K by a 4% margin.
My Windows install is really fucking weird. I had to repair the fuck out of it to get it to work. Like a year ago when I updated it.
So
something went wrong with the update and it fuckered things.
Processor.
And I had
in Modern Warfare 3 is much the same using either
I had to do a lot of different. I had to get the game store to work. The Windows Game Store. And it was absolutely broken as shit. It took me forever.
Now, Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024
the
highlights the issue with 23H2 for Ryzen. Whatever's causing the performance regression is solved with 24H2, as we go from a situation where the
22631 includes, I believe, the hotfix for Ryzen processors,
to on par when using 24H2. We don't see quite the same thing in Spider-Man Remastered, but even so,
a lot of problems with the 9000 series when it launched. The 7000 series would have the same sort of performance progression as the 9000 series.
It's 9% slower with 24H2. It's still a reasonable margin, but it is a big improvement for the Ryzen processor. Using 23H2, the 9700X was just 3% faster than the 14700K, but on 24H2 that margin is extended to 9%. So another substantial performance increase in favor of the Ryzen processor. We see when testing with Ghost of Tsushima that the 9700X was slower than the 14700K by a 4% margin on 23H2, but moving to 24H2 pushed it slightly ahead. Just a 2% margin, so performance is much the same overall, but still an improvement for the Ryzen processor. The Cyberpunk
14,000 series are also overclocked out the wazoo. The really interesting thing here, guys, is totally not going to... Like, the results here are kind of... I wouldn't even say are comparable anymore, even though basically they were comparing an 8-core like flagship processor to another 8-core flagship processor, right? I don't even think they're comparable anymore, and the reason for that is because now I would say gaming processors are the X3D lineup, right? And the 7800 X3D would be a step ahead in a lot of these cases compared to the 9000 series. And what you're actually more interested in is the comparison between the 9700X, the 7800 X3D, and then the 7800X, which would show you the uplift for the X3D chip, the addition of X3D memory to the chip itself, and then you could actually move the claim from the 7700X to the 9700X, which is difference between the two. 7800X, I think 7700X is the 8-core normal one. You look at the difference between the two, and then also the uplift from the X3D on top of it, which is
3H2,
what everyone's
there is
waiting for,
something
more or less.
keeping
And
Ryzen's
apparently,
performance,
allegedly,
as here
there's
the
going to be XRD
9700X
chips
is
next
6%
year
slower
in the
than the
spring.
14700K.
CES, apparently, they're going to
Yet, when we
introduce some.
move to 24H2,
But apparently, there's also going to
performance
be
reaches
one
parity.
XRD chip later this year, allegedly, which
We're
is a
also
rumor.
seeing a similar thing in Borderlands 3. The 14700K delivered similar performance on both 23H2 and 24H2, whereas the 9700X saw a 10% uplift. That said, the 1% lows are still much lower relative to the 14700K, which is a bit unusual. There was no performance uplift for either processor using 24H2 in Baldur's Gate 3, making the 9700X a good bit slower than the 14700K, around 12% slower in fact. The Core i7 processor delivered the same performance in Black Myth Wukong using either version of Windows 11. Meanwhile, the 9700X was 5% faster on 24H2, placing it on par with the 14700K, at least when comparing the average frame rate. The 1% lows were still higher on the Intel processor, 10% higher when looking at that 24H2 data. Both CPUs saw a 3% uplift on 24H2 in Hitman 3, which meant the 14700K was still around 12% faster than the 9700X, so an easy win here for Intel then. The Ryzen 7 processor isn't able to beat the Core i7 in Warhammer 3, but depending on the Windows 11 version used, it can get reasonably close. For example, using the current 23H2 build, it is 8% slower, but with 24H2, it's just 5% slower, and we also see that those 1% lows close up. Returnal saw no performance difference between these two CPUs using either version of Windows, and we did see results like this in a surprisingly large number of games, though I've skipped over many of them as they're rather uninteresting, or at least the data is, but of course we will feature them in the big breakdown graphs towards the end of the video. Here we have an example in Hogwarts Legacy where both CPUs saw massive performance gains when upgrading to 24H2. On the current 23H2 build, the 14700K was 14% faster than the 9700X, but on 24H2 it's just 6% faster, and this is due to the fact that the Ryzen processor enjoyed a 17% performance uplift. Still, even the Core i7 became 10% faster, so for whatever reason, Hogwarts Legacy plays much better on 24H2. Now, the Star Wars Jedi Survivor results are very interesting, but please note this data was recorded prior to the recent patch. Testing on 23H2 saw the 14700K beat the 9700X by 6% margin, but unexpectedly that margin grew to 11% on 24H2 as the Intel CPU saw a massive 20% performance uplift. Both CPUs saw a small performance improvement when moving to 24H2 in Dying Light 2, but in this example, scaling remained the same as the 14700K maintained a 9% lead over the 9700X using both versions of Windows 11. Both CPUs
Thread Director, guys, the thread scheduler, not Thread Director, that's Intel. The thread scheduler in Windows is still one of the most broken things when it comes to multi-core CPUs and how it distributes workload.
And then we're moving to 24H2. That margin actually slightly extended out to 10%. Now, Fortnite is one of the games where we found massive gains for Ryzen on 24H2. But for Intel, there appears to be no change. This means while performance is equal between these two processors using 23H2, when we upgrade to 24H2, the 9700X becomes 14% faster, and that is a massive performance uplift. Now, from previous testing, we found that Zen 5 processors don't perform that well in Starfield, and we're certainly seeing that here as the 14700K is at least 17% faster, seen when using the Insider Preview
Test scenario
build.
they used, we talked about before,
No
back when I played Starfield, is like disk bound.
Much faster in this title.
It is a very weird scenario as opposed to being in the capital.
And when using 23H2, the 9700X is 9% slower than the 14700K, and despite a 9% uplift when moving to 24H2, it's still 7% slower than the 14700K, as the Intel processor also saw a performance uplift. The Remnant 2 results are similar to what we've seen in games such as Cyberpunk and Flight Simulator, in the sense that the 9700X is much slower using 23H2, but 24H2 does appear to solve whatever the problem was here for Ryzen. In this example, the 9700X was 13% slower on the current Windows 11 build, but just a percent slower on the 24H2 Insider Preview build. Now, regardless of the Windows version used, we see the same performance in Horizon Forbidden West, and this means that the 9700X is 7% slower than the 14700K. The last game that we're going to look at the results for is the Rift Breaker, and here the 14700K is much faster than the 9700X when using 23H2.
Oh, we still need to do the DLC for Rift Breaker, don't we?
The Ryzen processor is 13% slower.
So we can do like a 500% run or something like that? 5,000% run.
With 24H2. The Intel CPU is still faster, but that's a much
I forgot about that.
smaller
Everything else
margin.
just kind of came together.
Okay, so as I found in my day one review testing 13 games, the 9700X is 5% slower than the 14700K using Windows 11 version 23H2, and we confirm that here with 42 games. There are 23 games where the 9700X is slower by a 6% margin or greater, and then 13 of those games saw double-digit margins.
You're really interested to see what the X3D is,
clearly
guys.
slower than
X3D
the Core
chips.
i7 processor. But even if we upgrade to 24H2, the 9700X is still slower than the 14700K.
Specifically, I'll also be interested in data from the
Though
9950X and 9900. Is the 9900X even out?
They're a bit closer now, and really you could say performance is
Chip that no one wants?
comparable, despite the Intel part doing a little bit better. It's not exactly parity like AMD claims, though it is sort of close enough that you'd probably let that claim slide, and it would be possible to achieve parity with a smaller selection of cherry-picked games, let's say, and we do know that first-party benchmarks love to cherry-pick. So,
Your mom
where
loves a
did
cherry pick.
The Core i7 14700K make the biggest gains on 24H2?
Oh.
There are 3 key examples, and they include Homeworld 3, Gears 5, and Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Those titles are outliers though, because of the 42 games tested, we saw a 5% margin or less in just over 80% of them. This led the 14700K to being just 3% faster on average when using 24H2. So there is some performance to be gained on Intel processors, though not nearly as much as what we see with Ryzen, as the 9700X saw a 7% uplift. Now, just because I know some people will want to see this data, even though it was included in the day one review and it won't have changed.
Power numbers don't matter, guys. Efficiency only matters for mobile applications and server. For your home use where you plug into the magical well that just shoots electrons into your computer, it really doesn't matter.
But I have included
Even
some
with really
power
expensive
figures
electricity, mainly because everything goes into a low power state
Testing
when
with
it's not,
Baldur's Gate 3, the
when you're not playing
9700X
games, and most people
consumed
don't play
84
games
watts of power,
24 hours a
while
day.
The 14700K sucked down an insane 171 watts. The Intel CPU did deliver 13% greater performance.
Some people are
in this
really,
example,
it's like goes back like
but we
2
also
decades.
saw
Some people are
power
really
usage
obsessed with
increase
power
by
numbers and efficiency numbers.
104%. It's a
You want
similar
to-
story
when you put
in
into
The Last of Us
context, it
Part
doesn't really
1,
matter much.
where the 14700K offered 8% greater performance, but at the cost of increased power usage, this time by 127%.
Used to be
Finally,
flip
in Cyberpunk
flop
2077,
where
the 14700K
Intel was the
7%
efficient one
faster, but
and
again
AMD
required
was not.
massive amounts of power to achieve that small performance advantage. 129% more power in this example. And this right here is why it's been difficult, if not impossible, to recommend
Burn
Intel's
coal
13th
outside to power
and
my
14th
computer, guys.
generation CPUs, and that's before the stability concerns were a concern. Admittedly, this was a bit of an odd comparison because although the Ryzen 7 9700X and Core i7 14700K, they are priced to be direct competitors, for various reasons, I don't actually recommend you buy either of them, as there are 2 alternatives that make far more sense. Firstly, the 14700K
Wait
costs
is
at least
alternative, guys.
$380 US, and the 9700X
Waiting is alternative.
$340 US. And if you're after the ultimate gaming performance, we recommend just spending a little bit extra to get the 7800X 3D, though right now that's easier said than done, as availability for the 7800X 3D looks very poor. So, in the event that you can't get the X3D chip, we recommend saving the money and getting the 7700X, which can be had for just $270 right now, or $250 on Amazon.
Non-X3D? No, 5800X 3D.
Cheaper than the 9700X.
I think it's 5700X now.
Level of gaming performance. And this is true regardless of the operating system used, Windows 10 included. The 9700X is a perfectly fine gaming CPU. As we've seen, it competes really well with the 14700K while using substantially less power. And that's probably an understatement. The 9700X is almost generating energy relative to the Intel processor. Again, the problem with the 9700X is the price. It always has been. Well, that and AMD's very bad marketing claims. If the 9700X was more like $280 US, then I'd certainly suggest buying it, but at $340 US, you're just better off getting the 7700X. As for the 14700K, sure, it's a little bit faster overall, but the power usage alone rubs it out as a potential option in my opinion. Then on top of that, we have the very serious stability concerns. And right now, I'm not really sure where we stand with those. It'll be some time before we know if the current updates have solved the issue or not. So although we would have recommended the 14700K anyway, we really can't recommend it until we know if those
They
issues
overclocked
have
the
been
stuff, you know,
resolved.
those chips, guys, and
So the winner
they
of the
figured it out 2 years
9700X
later.
versus 14700K battle is the 7700X. You're welcome.
What?
In all seriousness, the primary goal of
700
this
X3D.
content was to see how the Intel processor scaled between the two versions of Windows 11, and there are certainly some gains to be had, but overall,
They don't sell the 5800 X3D anymore. What? Pretty sure this is still a really, really fucking good option, guys. Yeah, they replaced the 5800 X3D with the 5700 X3D, which I think has slightly lower boost clocks on it, but it's still 8 cores and has a giant X3D cache on it.
overall, it's a little less impactful for
Yeah. Let's see. Just remember. I'm pretty sure. It's just the 5700 X3D is a slightly slower 5800 X3D, but it's also pretty cheap. Although, you know, if you're buying a new system and buying an AM4 probably means AMD has some issues with their pricing. Yeah.
all the Intel processors than what we saw with
I'm
Ryzen,
recommending like a
which
5-year-old
is
chip.
what we
Well, it's not
suspected would
technically
be the
5 years
case.
old.
For now,
No,
I'm
I mean,
waiting
it
for
technically
the
is 5 years
official
old.
rollout of 24H2 before I do any more CPU benchmarking, and hopefully it'll be released soon so we can update all of our CPU data, and then hopefully we can do all of that before the next generation of Intel processors arrive, because if we can't, it's going to be a little bit messy. Anyway, that is
When the
going to do it
1500
for this
X3D
video.
released, it was
If you enjoyed
2021.
it, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, do all that stuff. Again, we have the new members tab, so you can click join and get some cool perks there if you're interested. If not, perfectly fine. We also still have Patreon, so the link to that is in the video description. Yeah, check out either one of those. Your support is greatly appreciated. But yeah, that is going to do it for this one. I'm your host, Steve. Thanks for watching.
Love you,
and
Steve.
I will see you next time. Catch you again soon. I
Oh,
don't
no!
know, one or two, maybe both.
Acting like it's never gonna happen. Support him or else, guys. Not have the release date on it. Intel does when it releases. I don't know why it doesn't have a release date. Old stock. April 6th, 2022. Half years ago? Not 3 years ago. 2.5 years ago. But the AM4 platform is also old, and the 5000 series released like a year and a half prior to that. It was like a last minute, just, hey, let's see what happens, and then they hit it out of the park with it. Okay. We're going to call things here for tonight, guys. We had a little bit of extra time there. I was actually kind of curious to see how the patches for Windows and Ryzen are kind of planing out, because I have a Ryzen. And also the intercore CCD, which is also the intercore latency, which is actually a big deal for the 9000 series, the 9900 and 9950X non-3Ds, because the 3Ds aren't out yet, are a big deal. And I thought that was actually going to be a benchmark then. It's not. So we're probably going to take a look at that when it comes out too. The X3D chips we're also very interested in. It's a hardware release cycle, guys. Intel's new CPUs are allegedly supposed to come out this fall as well. Their 15000 series. AMD or NVIDIA is supposed to release their 5090 this fall as well, winter, fall. And there's plenty of announcements for CES. It seems like some things have got pushed back. Also, AMD is releasing their new GPUs in not releasing, but announcing them, I believe, in CES as well. So, we have more stuff to cover, guys. Kind of in a chill place right now, mainly due to the fact that I got COVID and kind of cut down on our time, and then also not really much to cover here since we aren't covering really any Reddit. There isn't really a Reddit for Space Marines 2. And in addition to that, World of Warcraft isn't worth covering because it's been out for so long. It's just worth playing, as it turns out. So, once again, tomorrow, guys, or later today, will be more Space Marine 2. We'll continue on with gearing up my character, or just gearing classes, I guess it is. Playing through the co-op missions. I don't plan on playing for an extended period of time. We will be playing World of Warcraft and gearing my character 22nd, I think, so 4 days from now. I'll take care of that when that happens. But alright, guys, we're going to call things here for this evening, guys. Weird stream tonight. That happens. I had some other stuff going on as well that also interrupted things, and I got a late start here, which just made things worse, but that'll happen. Videos up on YouTube for the new patch notes, although it's not objective, overarching look at things as opposed to talking specifically about values and weapons they buffed and whatnot, because it doesn't really matter at this point. Have to wait and see how the difficulty shakes out and how Arrowhead approaches difficulty in the future before it comes into context what the patch changes actually mean. So, yeah. So, Helldivers is on hiatus, guys. I'm not, it's kind of tough way to approach things. I don't hate Helldivers 2 at all, and I plan on playing it in the future. Just right now, with the current difficulty the way it is, it's not worth playing, in my opinion. And it'll be interesting to see whether or not the player base realizes it, or whether or not they just want a button, push it, and stuff explodes. So, yeah. Deliver the package quest, but you think of delivering pizza in the modern world. Whatever gets you through your day-to-day life. If you delivering a pizza for Grubhub actually is like Helldivers 2, and I kind of don't want to see the neighborhood you're delivering pizza in, if that's the case, all the more power to you. You know, we all need different ways to get through life, right? Disabled play with friends. I mean, they had issues with the friend system. They supposedly fixed it a couple times. I don't play with friends because I don't have any. I don't play with friends, but supposedly they fixed that a while ago. So I don't know. It'd be worth checking out if that's the case for you. If you wanted to play with your friends, I could definitely see that being an issue. Me personally, I'm a difficulty whore, I guess. I really like harder games, especially when they're it's enthralling. Because I'm not a big PvE person to begin with. It's enthralling where normally you need PvP to get the kind of constant change or interactions which are difficult, right? Yeah. So that's basically on hiatus for me until whenever they figure out. Basically, they introduced a patch that it's a mega buff patch for everything. So if you want to play and be OP, now's the time to play, by the way. But for me personally, the really driving thing for me while playing the game was the difficulty, and it was gone prior to the patch, and now it's even more gone, so I don't really have any interest. I watched some other people play it earlier today, and it really looks like it's easy mode now, so have to wait and see. Huh. Well, that's it. File a bug report on that one. That's interesting. I heard it was fixed, and I guess it's not, so I don't know. I guess they have to fix more friends problems. You know, we were talking earlier, specifically in Helldivers 2, guys, we were talking about how it would be a good idea for them to swap to the Unreal Engine for multiple different reasons. Another reason for them to swap to the Unreal Engine is the fact that it is native crossplay. The game engine itself is designed with crossplay in mind. And with the Stingray engine, I'm pretty sure What it is there is layers of Band-Aids to make the PlayStation system work with the PC system. Like, they have Band-Aids on Band-Aids to get shit to work, and they're just trying to, like, peel it apart and figure out exactly what's broken. And my guess is, like, there's still issues with it because they can't figure out what exactly isn't working properly. Because the Stingray engine, as it turns out, an antiquated game engine that was basically a side project for a company working on AutoCAD, was not the best choice for something long-term support and something that works cross-play. Yeah, cross-platform, which tends to be more intricate and demanding from a back-end standpoint to begin with. So, yeah. Yep. Well, it's Helldivers 2, I think, is one of these games where I think a lot of people are still interested in it. It's just waiting for the things to come together to make people want to play it again. Which is why I'm still interested in playing it too, is because it's actually a lot of fun. There is not... People will say what they want about Space Marines 2. Space Marines 2 is not Helldivers 2 in any way, shape, or form. It's another Horde shooter, but Space Marine 2 is like Dark Tide, it's like Vermintide, it's like maybe even Left 4 Dead 2, right? Helldivers 2 is like an open world last stand horde game, and there isn't another game like it. There's just absolutely nothing. People say there is, but there is not. It's a very, very, very different experience, and it was also very difficult, which is something I really appreciate in the game, and not necessarily in a way in which it was felt like it was artificial difficulty. Where in Space Marine 2, for instance, you turn up the difficulty, you just start dying a lot just for just dumb reasons. Yeah. Yep. Well, I'm sure it will in the future. Either way, guys, we got to call things here for this evening, guys. Tonight will be more Space Marines 2. We didn't get to play tonight, mainly because we covered the patch notes. The video's up on YouTube, as well as just covered a random video there because I was interested in how the other patches are playing out for Windows for the performance game for Ryzen. So, yeah. Anti-cheat is overactive. I'll toss you into the sky. I guess. I mean, there's also a lot of people cheating in Helldivers 2, so, yeah. I don't know. There's issues with it. But we're going to call things here, guys. We're going to get out of here. Anyways, guys, if you are new to the stream, you enjoyed the bullshit, enjoyed the fun, you enjoyed watching me podcast for 2 hours, make sure to hit the follow button on your select platform. I stream to Kick, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, as well as Trovo every day from late night to early morning, GMT-6. So late night North America time. I usually stream for about 5 to 6 hours, give or take, depends on my life, what's happening, etc., etc. I've been sick with COVID for the last week and a half, although I'm getting over it. I'm still really nasally, and it makes it difficult to talk for prolonged periods of time, which generally we haven't been doing the podcast. Tonight was an exception due to the patch that came out, but tomorrow will probably be Space Marines 2. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching my streams as always, and I hope you guys have a wonderfully fantastic Tuesday night and Wednesday morning. Have a good day, guys.